work session for the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, November 25th, 2025. Going to call the roll. Alderman Barnhill.
Present.
Alderman Blanton.
Here.
Alderman Caesar. Not here yet. Alderman Peterson.
Here.
Alderman Berger.
Present.
Alderman Brown.
Present.
Alderman Potts.
Present.
And Vice Mayor Baggett.
Present.
Okay, and the mayor's here too. Citizen comments, I have no speaker cards except for one on an item that is on the agenda. We'll go to item number 1 is event permit for Franklin Makers Market at Bicentennial Park, May the 2nd, 2026. No questions? We'll go to City of Franklin contract 2024-0324 with Friends of Franklin Parks for lease agreement for workers' houses at the park at Harlansdale Farm.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening. I have with me tonight Tori Barnhill, Executive Director of Friends of Franklin Parks, and this is a lease agreement between our two entities. It was similar to what we did with the historic Hayes home, to where we would lease the property, and then while we do design and construction, this would be a 50-50 match with Friends of Franklin Park. So this is a great public-private partnership that we've done before. The city will pay for infrastructure utilities to those structures, and then it would be a 50-50 match from that point forward as we go into the structures of the two worker houses. These are the two worker houses that are along the main drive at Harlansdale, at the park at Harlansdale. So a lot of history with those two structures, so we're excited to there's 4 on the property. We'll start with these two so that we can open it up to the general public, as well as staff will use them during large special events on site. So it does have some capability of doing some internal department and types of events as well. So anyway, I know that Tori wanted to say a couple of words, if we may, and we appreciate, there are many Friends of Franklin Parks board members that are here in the audience with us tonight, and we appreciate what they do on a volunteer basis, especially during this time of year. So, Tori?
Good afternoon, and thank you so much. On behalf of Friends of Franklin Parks and the Harlansdale Committee, we're very excited for this lease to finally come before you. I think we've talked publicly about this a few times, and the details are in there for any questions you may have, but I wanted to share just a little bit more of why this is so important for our community. And so I brought the book that Clay Harlan and his son wrote, The Parks That Can't Be Sold, and it talks a lot about the stories there and the people that worked. And when I first started reading this book, the prologue, it just captured me, and it read, if you don't mind, we found that by telling the story to each other, the parts of the farm that were truly valuable are still alive. It turns out that it wasn't the land or the horses or the barns. It was the hard work it demanded and the people who worked it and the lessons it taught us. And I think through restoration of these two houses and having interpretive signage like we have now at the barn and at the Hayes house, the community can come learn more about the people who work there and even more stories, and activate the campus and benefit on many levels.
Board have any questions?
I have one.
Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
I apologize, it's my computer's restarting. But if there is how long is the lease for? What's the term?
15 years and then 2 additional 5 years.
And if there's a subtenant, how do we handle if you were to lease?
It would be allowed. So we will handle these. So the lease, what you have is almost like what we did with the historic Hayes home. There is a lease during construction period. So the lease would be to where we would do design together, and that may take up to a year, and to go through the channels of historic preservation, as well as approvals for both boards. And then we'll go to construction. After that, it would be to where Friends is able to rent the facilities at a discounted rate for that amount of time, which Tori was sharing, because they are included in the capital funding of it all for over 15 years, and then the additional. The sublease would be to where if basically what it looks like today is if they are having an equestrian show or they're having something on the property, they also could come in and utilize these for their purposes. And we would work through the special event permit to make sure that they meet all of our requirements as a city and that staff, we're on the same basis. We do this now on the property. We have to because of all the events, but that is what that would be. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think I was thinking just more because Hayes House it was more clear to me like the long-term programming of Hayes House just in general. These could be leased out, I would think, to like
We will not.
various other or like.
Well, I think we're using, it
For a
would not be
longer-
leased out, it would be more of a rental. So
Yeah,
you would
okay.
rent it during a special event for a specific time, for a specific purpose, versus leasing it out to someone, such as another nonprofit
Yeah.
or that type of thing. So a play on words, if I may.
Got it. No,
Vice
I
Mayor.
think that's good.
Shorter
clarification.
term in
So
nature.
they'll be
Shorter
shorter
term
term,
aligned
thank you.
typically with maybe another event.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Alderman Berger, then I'll get Alderman Barnhill.
Do they have to be an entity in order to lease or rent them out?
No, we would open this up to the general public. So one of the houses is really opened. It's been gutted over the years, and so we've got to actually rebuild. So that'll probably be more of a smaller meeting space. So what we talked about, and that's included in master plans, is if you have a wedding on the property, it would be a great bridal area or for a groomsman.
Yeah, yeah.
During a special event, it could be that this is the location where you would do your registration. So it just depends on, it's open, there's not a specific use. The other house would be set up more of like what it is today. It actually has a kitchen. It actually does have a restroom and those kind of things.
Are you restoring the kitchen?
We are.
In that?
We're
Okay.
gonna-
Somebody had asked me some questions about that the other day, and I didn't really know, but what are the ages of those? 1950s?
No, they were built during the workers at the factory. So these were I believe it was the 1950s or 40s.
Yeah,
Those were
early,
some,
okay.
I'm not certain,
And the square footage of each of these homes are probably what,
less than 1,000 square feet.
or less? in total?
600?
Maybe 600
Really?
square.
Hmm.
They're very small.
Okay, and are all these houses, and somebody asked me this too, and I said, I assume so, but I didn't know, are in a condition that is restorable?
All of them will be restored as any structure on the property under the National Historic Registry. So we have to at least do an effort toward those as we work through the layers that you would have with the Tennessee Preservation Office as well as it's with the historic zoning. So they may not be what they were when they were functional, but you would always want to save the bones and the look of them totally as much as possible, I would say.
What I'm asking too, because some of the wood might have been termited,
Oh,
termites
yeah.
and stuff like that.
As
But-
we have
So
on-
I'm just saying, are there any that are not restorable?
No, I think we can do something. It may be repurposed
Okay.
versus,
That's fine.
yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So where it sits, it'll stay.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Item 3 is discussion and
Thank you.
update of proposed development of Bousquet Place, also known as the Hill property. Not because of the hills, but because it's on a hill.
I think we have some staff folks, Vernon and Tom and Walter will walk you through this some, and we have the partners that are working on this project as well. We've updated this from what you saw several months ago to talk about some additional options on how this could take shape in terms of the number of units and how this would work, and specifically the subsidy that might be necessary to help implement the project. So Vernon, take it away if you're ready.
Well, thank you. Good evening, and more importantly, happy Thanksgiving to you and your families. We certainly have a lot to be grateful for. And the purpose of our presentation this evening on Bousquet Place is to provide an update, a little bit about where we were and where we are. Derek Jackson, Kim Rundell, Derek Solomon representing the Hill LLC, and Tom and Kathleen are here as well to assist and respond to any questions. Going back a number of years, we charged the LLC to come up with a plan for the Hill property, and you may recall, and Tom, if you want to move that on, that they had proposed 33 units, and that's the pro forma that was presented to you back a couple years ago, and the request for some funding support or a shortfall in this development for those 33 units, 10 of which would have been for affordable families' incomes that are 80% or below of the MSA here in Middle Tennessee, and then the 23 units would be for workforce families whose income falls within the 80 to 150% of the median income. So that request was for about $5.1 million. You had asked us to go back and work to see if we could add additional units, and that's what we're showing you here, that after the LLC went back and worked with their team, they were able to look at the 33 units again and refine those figures, much of which came from the administrative fees, to reduce that request from 5.1 to 4.1. But adding an additional 11 units, 10 of which would be affordable units, the remaining would be workforce units. The request before you today is about $3.48 million for those units. Now, on the bottom of this illustration, I thought it'd be beneficial as we work through these types of scenarios to show what the cost impact is per unit. Because as we talk about creating affordable housing, workforce housing, density is a part of that conversation. So you can see that with the affordable units, there's about a 53 or a 33,000 difference per unit. And with the workforce units, the subsidy or contribution needed to make them come a reality is about the same, another 33,000. But it goes down substantially from what the 33 units would support. So that's the request before you. What I'd like to also point out as we have this discussion and get some input from you is that the LLC doesn't have a lot of resources to keep going back to the drawing board. And in our conversations with them recently, they've really want to have some type of acknowledgement whether to continue down this path or maybe it's just not feasible. But 44 units is a big deal in that workforce and affordable housing range in our community. We haven't seen anything like this in the close to 19 years that I've been with Franklin, except for what the Housing Authority has been able to accomplish with the redevelopment of their public units through the HUD funding and changes in their regulations. I also would like to point out in the page, in the middle or the bottom third of the page, that talks about the partial infrastructure investment. So that's a cost. The 1.5 million is needed to help develop and prepare that site for the units. The land reimbursement, I wanted to remind you, comes from the water management portion that we need to make whole, and that's $479,700. The community development block grant funds, the $600,000, comes in future allocations from the city. So it's not really out of our city pocket. It's part of the entitlement program that we receive funds every year, and that could be even a little bit more depending on the timing of development. The remaining fees reflect what our development fees would be, inclusive of impact fees, but also take into account some of the relief provided in Title 21 for some of the affordable and workforce housing units. I don't want to get into those details here this evening because where we're at this stage is a request before you for Biscay Place to create 44 units in the amount of $3,480,590. I'd like Derwin, if it's okay, to add anything that I've missed, and we are ready to answer any questions.
Vernon, let me chime in on a couple things that have impacted this in terms of how we look at dollars and contributions. At one point, the county had pledged, I think, $1 million towards this project. That dropped off. That had been some ARPA money, some of those dollars that they have since reprogrammed. So that was something the project had to absorb. That at one point was additional public participation. So that was lost, and I think the team worked hard to try to still find a path forward. There is another option for you that is not on paper here exactly, but there are 10 affordable units in here. You have an option, if you wanted to make those 10 workforce units and make this an entirely workforce project. I don't know if that's what you want to do, but that would change the math up there from a subsidy of around just under 3.5 million to under 3 million, because that's about a $600,000 swing, because there's about a $60,000 per unit additional subsidy to bring that from workforce into the affordable range. So I know there's a lot of things you're juggling here, and the numbers are part of it, but there's also a policy and sort of setting an example in the community about how we could work and deliver a neighborhood in this type of partnership. But that's another option for you to just think about and give us direction on. And I think as Vernon referenced and as the team's looking at, I think we just need some really good guidance and feedback on, do you want to continue to pursue this? There's been a significant amount of time and effort and some dollars put into getting to this point. And do you want to continue down this road, or is there another path you want to look at? So I turn it over for additional questions and discussion from there.
Well, good evening. Thank you again for just allowing us to be here this evening. And I know we worked on this project for at least 5 or 6 years, if not a little bit longer. But we feel we got a good product to do to make it to help meet some families' needs to live here in Franklin. And we went back and we did go back and trying to fill the gap of $1 million. And part of it is the Housing Authority ourselves. We're going to put in $250,000 because we really want to make this happen. And even the partnership, we had a 6% administrative fee, and here we dropped it down to 2%, which made up about another $700,000 or $800,000. So we are committed to it, and not looking to make anything off of this, but just let you know what we have done as a partnership to commit as well to change the numbers so we can make this affordable and present them to the board so we really think we can make it happen. We still have our partners. We got Pinnacle who's willing to partner with us to provide the construction loan. We have the Housing Fund of Nashville still committed to us to buy at least 10 of the houses up front. And as we continue to do this, we're going to continue to look at other things that may come. We have some contractors who are looking at want to partner with us. So part of this, them want to say, okay, hey, we're willing to commit to do some things just to make this happen. So we're going to continue to work on that. So part of this is we're committed to it, and we know. And I would say this, just to, this board, affordable housing, all the years I've been here, have worked with us. I just want you to know that. So, the mayor knows this. I'll ask. I'm always going to ask. And I know this board has been committed that when you can do it, you've done it. But we as a team on this project, we have spent a lot of time on it. We spent probably already $150,000 on this just to get the plans together where we are right now, because we really feel that knowing the families that we're trying to reach and serve, I know it's only a small amount, but I'm like most of you, I know you know this, talking to a lot of the owners and restaurants who I talk to all the time. One of the things they tell me is that, hey, we're losing workers every day because they can't afford to live here. And it's a strain on them. And I know that's a part of, I know we all want to see something better, but that's part of why we have stuck with this. And I'll be honest with you, I've gotten tired. But we know we're not doing it for ourselves. You know, I think Kim and Derek, we've committed to doing this because we know that you've been committed to doing it. So I'm not saying that because over the year, I've been here 18 years, and I don't know of a year that I haven't come to this board on affordable housing and you haven't tried to help. And so this is just another project. We real feel good about it, but we can't do it without you. We do need the city help on this. That's
Alderman Brown. Oh, yeah. You need to say something, Mr. Martin?
If I could make a couple points, Mayor, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to share with you and also the opportunity to get some feedback from you on this. One thing I'll point out, this is still kind of stubby pencil work to a great extent. The graphic that you saw at the beginning is a sketch. It is not yet a plan. So the aspect, we've looked at it, looks like there's 44 units. As we get further into actual design, if this goes forward, it might not be. So that part's still stubby pencil, but we just wanted to give you some numbers that you could really digest and what the picture is with these two different numbers of units. And the per unit, the breakdown of the per unit cost is really insightful, I think. And along those lines also, that the bottom line might be $3.4 million, but if we think about this, it's not a one-time commitment now. You know, they're not anywhere close to needing those funds yet. You're talking about a budgeting process over 3 years, you know, maybe something in fiscal year 27, maybe something else in fiscal year 28, and even further all the way out to fiscal year 29. So these are the kinds of things that we could talk about with you over the next couple of months of how that might shape out. Thank you.
Alderman Brown.
Quick question and a comment. On the 10 units that you talked about, yeah, I see the pickup of 650, but do you lose any grants or opportunity or other things that come with those 10 units? Yeah, I had a feeling that was going to be the case. I figured it wouldn't be a one-for-one. So what is the actual, do we actually end up picking up anything or do we actually lose by losing those 10 units? We lose.
We'll lose the housing fund.
Gotcha.
But yeah, we definitely lose the housing fund because they have a limit of what the 10 units they would purchase from us.
Yeah.
Their limit between the 365 and 375. So we would lose that automatic from them purchasing those 10 homes. And they say something else.
Yes, yes. And we would also lose the $600,000 of CDBG funding, which
Gotcha.
that's $200,000 over the 3 years
Gotcha.
that Tom just mentioned, because that's only for affordable housing.
Gotcha. So not really an option to go there. Okay.
Oh, yes. Oh, we did want to mention too. Sorry. We did want to mention that these units will be deed restricted over the lifetime. They'll be deed restricted and the deeds will be renewed every time the parcel changes or the unit changes hands. So the goal is in perpetuity that these would be deed restricted for affordability.
Gotcha. Okay.
Alderman Blunt.
Are you done, Matt?
Yeah.
So I am totally supportive of this. I remember back in the day when Brant was still alive and this came to fruition as an idea. And I'm deeply saddened that it hadn't already happened because we wouldn't be dealing with the same numbers we're looking at today. I think that everybody will tell you that one of our biggest problems is not only traffic, but it's housing. And if we do not do something, it's not ever going to even partially get addressed. Is this going to fix our problem? Absolutely not. But I've always said, if we can find success on the Hill project and show that it can happen, maybe other partners will come do it in other places around our city. So while the price tag looks high, and obviously I am all about preservation, I'm about all the other entities we've given money for to preserve things, sometimes like on the spur of the moment, and we realize the importance of it. I think that we have got to do something to continue to improve our story as a community and the people who live here. And it's bold, but it's something that we have kept you bouncing this ball down the field for 5 years with a lot of roadblocks that we never saw coming. I think if you really pick this apart, not only are we not paying the $600,000 that's passed through, I think there's some other fees that while we collected as a general rule could also be not exactly what it looks like on paper. I am of the mindset we have got to make a bold move to make a difference. And if we continue to wait, it's only going to be unattainable for us to be a partner in fixing one of the biggest hardships we have as a community. So you have my total support, and I may not be popular, but it's what needs to happen.
Alderman Potts.
Thank you, sir. I did have a follow-up question for Derwin and for Kim, if y'all could take the podium for just a second. So I've seen firsthand, serving in the Housing Commission, the hard work that everybody that's in this group right now and the two that are at the podium, that they've been doing behind the scenes to make this happen. And it has not been done lightly. There's been a lot of heavy pencil work, and I did have the bigger question here, because I'm in alignment with what Alderman Blanton just said, and I also want everybody that's sitting here right now to think about. I can almost say for certainty that everybody that ran for their office at some point talked about attainable and workforce housing and how they supported it. And this is that threshold that we're about to cross over right now. So I wanted to ask Derwin and Kim, if this partnership doesn't move forward, what does the future of attainable and workforce housing look like from your perspective here in Franklin?
Well, for me, it's getting slimmer and slimmer. Even in the projects that we are doing at the Housing Authority themselves, and people have not, that's what I run into every day. Providing housing, and even through the tax credit program, where we're able to do the rental part of this, and we're able to get a lot of the equity from private investors, but that is becoming harder and harder to get. Even here, especially here in Wilson County. So for me, I see that becoming a bigger and bigger problem every day.
So for us, we were here maybe a month ago, talking about how long it's been since Habitat has built here. It's been since 2018. And while Derwin and his team, for lack of a better, they give a fish today, right? They're taking care of people who are needing affordable housing in a rental capacity. What we're looking to do is to really teach a man to fish. So we're trying to provide housing that will change the trajectory of the lives of the people that we're serving, and that will allow them to transition out of poverty. Housing is the single biggest way that folks do that. And so like I said, we have not built here since 2018. We do have a couple of houses that are happening that we hope to happen in 2027. But 44 houses is an opportunity to do 44 home buyer projects is super exciting to us. Yes, it might seem like a drop in the bucket, but it's nothing that's happened before. And it's a way to get the city of Franklin to be on the radar with some of the other more innovative cities. I don't want to say more innovative cities, that sounds bad. With cities who are moving towards housing innovation across the state. And if the city is interested in doing that, we would really love to make that happen.
So, Mr. Mayor, if I could make a closing comment.
Sure.
Thank you.
Then I'll get Alderman Barnhill after you.
So as I sit here and as a member on the Housing Commission, I'm looking at how we continue to grow this right now. And these difficult conversations that we talk about, gentrification here in Franklin, and trying to have people stay in our city and not move out because they can't afford it. This is one of these opportunities right now. And I'm greatly concerned if we happen to miss this one.
Anybody else? Yeah. Alderman Barnhill, had you next.
I'm still looking at the 60,000 difference between the workforce and affordable units and trying to figure out. So if we drop out 10 of the affordable units, we actually increase by 60,000 times 10, 600,000. So I've made my statement, and I'm not necessarily locked into that. But in the past, I've said that I thought we would have been better off if we'd only done the workforce housing on this particular project. And I'm trying to figure out where if there is a break-even point, because it's also been brought up that we'll lose this, we'll lose that, and we'll lose something else. So what is the break-even difference, Eric? Do you know?
Well, I learned tonight that the CDBG money would go away. That I was not certain of that, so I want to still ask us to look into that more fully. But if that's true, then you're kind of at even. You really didn't get a benefit. So that's something, and that's my apology there, but we'll check on that. But if that is indeed true, then you're kind of holding your own. I do want to note that we are reimbursing the full City of Franklin fees that are associated with the project, so we're not placing a city burden there. We're offsetting that as part of the subsidy calculation as well. But this is one that we essentially brought down about $1.6 million from what you saw last by increasing the number of units and sharpening some pencils on administrative costs and some other elements. And again, we had to also offset the loss of $1 million that we thought was coming from partnership with the county. So, we could always make another run at the county, see if they want to make that up to us. But, this is where we are with the best information we have right now.
The second comment, I do think it's extremely important that we do reimburse the water department.
You have to.
You have to. I think it's
Keep them
extremely
whole.
important. That's not one that we're going to try to jerk around a little bit and see if it's something we can do. I can probably support either one. I'll be honest with you, unless somebody says something different, I still like the 44 workforce units. One project, basically, one entity covering that and knowing what they're doing, and because I think that I think we're squeezing a lot in at 44 workforce units, but I think we're squeezing more if we're trying to get 10 affordable and 34 workforce units in there. So that's kind of my take on this. I think if we had that out, it'd make those numbers right there less numbers. Probably the bottom line would be close to the same thing, but that's kind of my take on this.
Go ahead, Mr. Gert.
Yeah, we have tossed around some ideas, Eric. We talked about the workforce units. It doesn't necessarily mean that we can't reduce the 10 units of affordable units to lesser amount and use the CDBG funds for infrastructure. There's not a direct correlation between a unit and the amount of money for infrastructure that the CDBG funds allows us to use. An example is some of the neighborhoods that the Housing Authority has redeveloped, and there were dozens and dozens of units that utilize funds, even a lesser amount than the 600,000. So I just want to share that with you. But as Tom mentioned, the stubby pencil, I like the analogy that if there is a desire to move forward, we want to keep Derwin energized and Kim and Derek to go forward with looking at how this can be created. If it's more workforce units and the numbers pencil out better as it goes forward, that certainly would be brought back to you before any final commitment would be made.
Alderman Caesar.
Thanks, Mayor. I wasn't the only alderman that attended the Williams County Association of Realtors discussion this week on the need for housing, and attainable and workforce housing was atop the list as far as the missing opportunities that we have here in the city. So that point and the opportunity to do something like this is not lost on me. I have a couple of questions, and maybe one of them is a very fundamental, rudimentary question, but at the risk of seeming fundamental and rudimentary, I'll ask the question. We toss around the idea of deed-restricted housing, and then we talk about the correlation between housing ownership and the ability for somebody to break out of generational poverty. And I worry about the deed restriction and how those two pieces come together. If you've restricted the deed and the ability of the person who's paying the mortgage on that property to appreciate the value of that house, to fully appreciate, are these two things really related, or are deed restricted houses as beneficial to the owner as maybe we've been led to believe?
I would, in my experience, and if Derek or Kim or Derwin want to add to it, is that the deed restriction provides housing for people whose family income falls within those median ranges of income within the greater Nashville area. By it being deed restricted, it would still appreciate in value, but when that home is sold, whatever time that is, the current property owner would realize the appreciated value, but they'd still need to sell it to a family whose income falls within those new ranges. And historically, those median incomes in the greater Nashville area and around the country have increased. So there is an appreciation, and if somebody looks at a basic market level in Franklin, well, it's not going to appreciate as much. But in other part of the countries that aren't as fortunate as we are to see this type of appreciation in land and housing values, it's a slower increase in value. But the importance of the deed restriction is to ensure that housing remains available to families whose income fall within those ranges, either the lower income range or that workforce range.
Okay, I think that's a good summary and appreciate that additional education. And then one final, more administrative question, Eric, on the item report. It lists the 4.1 and the 3.48 million. And then you talked about some of the city fees that have been calculated into that. Is that number baked into the 4.1 and 3.8?
Yes, that reversal of those fees is part of the city subsidy.
And so at the end of the day, the city subsidy would be, for the 33 unit scenario, would actually be $98,000 for each workforce unit, and $157 for each affordable unit for the 33.
That's
scenario.
in the 33.
Yes, for
scenario.
the 40.
Yes.
For the 44 scenario, would jump up to 120 or come down to the 125 and 65,000 respectively.
Correct.
If what Alderman Barnhill suggested would be moving entirely to workforce units, I assume then the maths have to be recalculated.
And I
across the
think
board.
we need to resolve a little further how the CDBG piece could work, and Vernon touched on it. There might be some balancing. You may do fewer affordable units, but you may need to keep a certain,
be a
certain
bottom
number
number,
in
yeah.
to access the CDBG funds.
Okay.
So it might be able to get that number down somewhat. You might be able to get closer to 3 million, just as an educated guess, than the 3.5 million of subsidy.
Okay.
Some of it is also how you want to approach the project and what makes sense to you, if you want to have a mix or just go all down one path or not.
Maybe just in closing, I would say that this is the need for these types of homes in our community is not lost on me. And the reality is the price is the price. And as city leaders, we have to decide if we want to help offset the price to help attack this missing middle, which is, based on the report I saw this past week, in the thousands. And while this isn't the largest bite in the world, the best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time.
Mr. Mayor.
Vice Mayor, and Alderman Peterson, I'll recognize you first because you're so far away.
Well, I was just going to say this has been an important thing for a long time, and we do need to move to get some things done. And it is, as I say, very important.
Vice Mayor.
So, a few things, but first of all, thank you for coming back, staff, also in looking at this and adding the additional units. I think we can look at this in a couple different ways. One, this specific project and the success of this project, specifically on this piece of land, on this, all these constraints, and say, like, can we make the math work? But I think if you step back and you look, us as policy making, like what's causing the issues that we have, we're effectively giving them, and you hear a lot of people say, well, the cost of our land is so high, that's why development can't build. And that's partially true, but the reality is that they've got free land here.
Yeah.
And you've got no fees.
Almost free.
And you got no, and we're paying 1.5 for infrastructure. And we're getting CDBG grants. And there's still a gap. So I think like at a higher level, the most value that yes, there's going to be 44 families that benefit and X number when they sell in the future. But if we don't walk away from this and like with us as a board and stop, laying back in our easy chair on, well, the land's so expensive, so you just hardly can't do it. And we don't sharpen our pencils and figure out how to solve the problem we got right here that has evidenced itself here, then we're just really blowing smoke. I mean, truly. And frankly, wasting money long term. I mean, because we're really not going to, yes, we can take a bite out of the elephant one bite at a time. I agree. But like, we're not going to have many more. Actually, I don't know of any other city land. There's a handful of acres that this could happen on, but I don't know when we're going to get free land again. It's not free, but I don't know when we're going to have city land where it can be free. And so I really think, I don't know what the Housing Commission does with this, if this goes forward, but there's some lessons here to be learned, and I hope we're really taking a hard look at this and realize like why. Yes, construction costs, inflation, all the rest of the things, but I think there's some stuff to be learned here. All right, that's that. Can there be appreciation recapture? Like when they sell, is there any mechanisms in place for some of that appreciation to be recaptured and go back to the LLC to maybe, I know y'all had talked originally about this kind of being in some ways, some of those management fees were kind of a self-propagating kind of funding mechanism. I would look into that. You don't have to answer that today, but if we keep moving forward, would want there to be some kind of, we want them to benefit from the appreciation, but at the same time, want hopefully this investment to go further than this dollar for dollar. And then I think I would not vote in favor of this until you go back to the county and ask for another $1 million. And I think that's just. I haven't stopped asking. Yeah, I know. And I think the message, and really, this is again, we got to look at this as kind of a petri dish to some degree of how we're going to start doing this in different ways. What can we learn from this? Like if we don't learn how to actually do things that are sustainably fiscally, which by the way, there's no fountain of funds in our 10-year capital plan for things like this. But we can learn from things like this that actually can make a huge difference in how we deal with affordable housing long term. And I think that's really, to me, the biggest benefit of this is what we hopefully can learn from it. And then the last thing is how much, Derwin, if we gave you $3.4 million, I think this is important for the board to know, what could you do on the rental side in the private market? I'm not saying either or. Hear me say I support this right here in learning from this. But this board needs to know, too, that on the rental side, if we're going to take bigger bites out of the elephant, apple too, whatever, we're going to have to look at different ways of getting affordable workforce. Because when my employees are going to Nashville and living in the Gulch, because it's the cheapest apartment they can find, to work in Franklin, true story, got two of them. Like the balance is off. And so how many for rent, like if we were to help on the for rent side, affordable, would that, maybe come back with that answer. I don't want to put you on the spot like that, Derwin. But I think we need to think about that because yes, it's the for ownership. This is a special project. But I hope the Housing Commission takes this and we really, and with staff and our private nonprofit partners, learn something from this. I've learned something that it's not just the land price. And anyway, so I would want to know from a rental standpoint, and we've done 200 or so without any city funds, just maybe some payment in lieu of taxes and stuff. We need those opportunities because that's what's going to get the numbers up. So our people aren't driving 45 minutes because it's cheaper to live in the Gulch.
Alderman Brown.
Final comment. It took me a minute to find that data, but I found it really interesting from that housing study that 47% of our workforce cannot afford to purchase a home in Franklin, and only less than 10% in healthcare and in business could actually afford to rent. So if ever we needed a reason to do it, that data was pretty clear to me that day. So I think that was probably the most compelling of the data that I saw. And Alderman, or Vice Mayor, to your point, we actually do have at least one other offer for free land in this city.
Oh, yeah.
And I think if we were to prove that the model can work, there's another person willing to donate land to see that workforce housing gets built if we can demonstrate that we can do it in a certain way. So I agree.
Well, I, for one, am tired of talking about housing needs. I'm blue in the face because of it, and I applaud Derwin and the whole team that's been working on this so long. I think this is a huge opportunity for us to move this forward and set an example, as I think Brandy mentioned, and I tend to focus a little more on the missing middle rather than the 10 affordable units. I kind of feel like we're doing a lot as far as affordable with the housing authority, so I probably would lean a little more toward the workforce housing. I think it's time for us to move forward. I'm sitting here thinking about Alderman Bransford when she was alive. She would have jumped over on every single alderman, beat you up to make sure you understood how important this was. So I don't think it's a matter of waiting any longer. You can't wait any longer. Let's get this thing started and move forward.
So would it be helpful for us to bring to you a proposal that focuses on a 44-unit project? We can work through the blend or some options on the blend of affordable and workforce to try to maybe look at what that subsidy looks like, but maybe get you all on the record with a resolution directing us to do this. Because we have done a lot of back and forth over a lot of years, and it would be very helpful to have a clear direction. And it seems like you all are getting pretty close. There's a little bit of homework we need to do to help you get there, but it seems like we're there, almost
I
there.
can't wait to read that caption.
That's right.
Alderman Berg.
No, we will write a resolution. Is that what, a next
Yeah.
step from you?
Yeah, I just wanted to weigh in and say I'm for the 44 workforce.
Okay.
Mayor, if I could, as I'm going to be leaving the city here, as you know, shortly, and for 37 years, I worked initially in a blue-collar community in the Midwest, and worked on redeveloping neighborhoods around the automobile factories that we had. And the common denominator, and I've learned quite a bit, was that some of those neighborhoods were in a state of disrepair, and the city went in and condemned those properties. Many of them were absentee landlords. So we had the land, and the tax credits at that time helped offset the cost of redeveloping those properties far more than they do today. And during the presentation last week, and we talked about the housing, there was a question from the audience, you were there, that talked about models in communities. And if you heard about the cities that mentioned, and I don't want to mention them, but I know, and I think you all know too, that some of those communities are larger, had industrial areas, that had the opportunity to have land coupled with a funding source to regenerate housing. And I want you to think about that, because Alderman Baggett hit it on the head. We have difficulty finding land, and that land's expensive unless we get creative and maybe look a little bit further out around the community, because this is not just the city of Franklin problem. It's a regional issue. And if we do our part, we'll make it better. I want to compliment Derek and Kim and Derwin for their continued tenacity to move this forward, and also Kathleen and Tom. Thank you.
Derek, did you want to say something? You're a silent guy up to this point. We're not asking for a long speech.
No,
but we're welcome you to make a
everything's been
comment.
said. I just want to say thank you, Board Mayor, Alderman, all the leaders here, all my partners, Darren, everybody that's been here since day one. I just wanted to inform everybody this project is actually named after Brant Bousquet, if you didn't know. And Brant actually won, we nominated him for the Associated Fundraiser Professional of the Year. And Virginia Bousquet sends her best regards to you all. She actually wanted to be here to say something, but she had to take off for the holidays. But anyway, just thinking about Brant and what he really meant to the city and what I've learned from him. I know he's in heaven with our Lord and Savior, smiling down. And a lot of time it's not about preservation of the building and the structure, but it's preservation of the family heritages and the families that's here, because we often forget about the people. And if we stop forgetting about people like Nola Nash and Williams County resident, 7th generation, Tyrell Hodge, who worked on this property, who opened the door just to allow you to get in this building tonight, that's when we lose the city. So let's go out and actually remember the people. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 4 is the next steps to select commercial tenants for the commercial spaces on 3rd Avenue South, and I think probably we'll couple that also with the redevelopment block update at the same time.
So probably a year and a half ago or so, we did have an initial discussion around some of the potential of the commercial space that is going to be along 3rd Avenue South with the City Hall block redevelopment project. And it's an exciting opportunity to bring some different activity and vibrancy to that portion of downtown, and also to complement the park that will be on the south end of our City Hall block redevelopment. So Kelly is going to take you through that, and we really want to get some guidance tonight on how that process of selecting some tenants there and how that might work going forward, and get your guidance. It's a multi-step process, so we're going to initiate some of that discussion tonight, and we'll be following up based on some of your direction going forward, and then Mark is going to step in and give you the project update. Chris Kepper is out ill tonight, so Mark is stepping into those shoes. So take it away, Kelly.
All right, thank you. It is time to start thinking about the commercial tenant spaces at City Hall. The first is how we go about selecting the best tenants and the best mix of tenants for the site and the location, and staff has been evaluating the benefits of using a licensed commercial brokerage firm to help us with that and manage that on behalf of the city. And the second is what types of tenants the BOMA would like to see in those spaces. We'd like to really spend time and get feedback. We've developed a draft list of criteria based on some past conversations in the work sessions, but we'd really like to get your feedback on that, because that will, one, help the broker market the spaces to potential tenants, and also help them select the appropriate tenants to bring back for BOMA approval. So we're going to walk through some things tonight and then try to really get your feedback. Before we start, just a quick overview of the available spaces. As a reminder, they're along 3rd Avenue South between the City Hall and the new public park on Church and 3rd. Looking down 3rd Avenue toward the square, they're on the right-hand side of the street. And looking across the park at the City Hall building, they're on the far left on the first floor that faces 3rd Avenue as well. There are up to 3 potential tenant spaces in this space. It's about 4,500 square feet in gross square footage, and they can accommodate 3 electrical subpanels and the 3 gas submeters for up to 3 spaces. The 2 on the end are slightly larger than the middle one, so the outer 2 could have full kitchens and the middle one could have more of a limited kitchen. And we have been working on a draft RFQ for a licensed broker and property manager to handle the leasing and the property management of the spaces on the city's behalf. And we've engaged the DFA in this already, and have had interest from several commercial brokers and property managers in this space who do work in downtown. So we've put together a list of qualifications. High level, We'd like the firm to possess a deep familiarity with the Franklin commercial market, particularly the unique dynamics of Franklin's historic downtown, play a crucial role in curating interesting and appealing tenants that complement the downtown area and the future park, provide the city with expertise throughout the process on all the aspects of leasing the spaces, and also provide property management services, which includes overseeing the operations and communicating with tenants and handling all the financials, move in, move out, all of that sort of reporting and part of that property management. This could be one combined firm. Sometimes they're split into different firms to focus on their specialties. They could partner in terms of submitting for qualifications. But we like to advertise that as early as next week through the end of the year and come back in the spring with a brokerage firm property manager for a professional services agreement. Once they're on board, they would market and show the available spaces. They would collect letters of interest from potential tenants. They conduct very thorough financial vetting for each of the prospective tenants. And then they would identify the best tenants or the tenant mix for the spaces and then bring that back to the board for approval. And that would be based on the tenant criteria. So that's really important that we spend some time on that. And of course, once they are approved, we'd work on preparing the lease agreements with them. So before we get to the tenant criteria or the characteristics about the tenants that you would like to see, the next slides are a refresher of the 2022 market and economic analysis that was done by the Gibbs Planning Group. And this study provided a variety of ground floor retail spaces and square footages that could be supported at the City Hall site. They include a small gourmet market, a bookstore, a florist and garden shop, bakery, coffee, etc., specialty foods such as cheese, meats, produce, a boutique pharmacy, and 2 to 4 small restaurants. So here's the important part. We'd like to get your feedback on these characteristics, and then we'll take your comments and incorporate them into a final form along with the broker's help, and then come back in the spring with that for your final approval. But they are create engaging spaces and experiences that complement the historic downtown and future park, contribute to the identity, character, and dynamics of historic downtown Franklin, activate 3rd Avenue, streetscape to draw pedestrians down the block from the historic public square, serve the surrounding residential neighborhoods and City Hall uses such as service-oriented retail and commercial uses, spark vibrant synergy with the adjacent public park to boost activity and enjoyment of the area as a whole, stimulate a climate for entrepreneurial ventures and investment and encourage small and locally owned businesses, activate the street throughout the day with continuous engagement and activity while avoiding late night hours past 10 p.m. or overnight uses, meet the permitted uses, of course, within the downtown district, so it's zoning compliant, and ensure that no noxious uses or sale of alcohol, smoke or vape products, etc., are not allowed as part of the lease agreements. So we're looking for your feedback on that. If there's anything you'd like to add, subtract, modify.
Alderman Bland?
Hello.
No, I'm sorry.
Doing this.
Alderman Berger then.
Maybe in a minute.
I would think part of where we need to start is to survey all residents, give them the opportunity to say, what do they see missing? What would they utilize in this area? It's not going to be just the residents, but they are our main core down there. So I would like to survey the residents and find out what they feel is missing, what they think is missing, and what they see that is needed. also going to the CVB and talking to them and asking, what do the visitors go into the visitor center and ask for? Sometimes it's missing downtown. I know that our post office has done a great job adding things like Tylenol and Kleenex and what have you that a visitor was downtown that might need. Julie Brown's done a great job of putting some of those things in and adding to some of the missing elements that we've had. But in the downtown core, residents, and then we need to talk to the merchants, and the merchants, the people that work with the merchants themselves, CVB, and look at that, and then really ask hard questions of what's missing in the downtown core. Then, I looked at the options that y'all were looking at here, giving us to look at. Food and gourmet market, pharmacy, and specialty foods probably are the highest ones that are missing in the area. We already have numerous bakeries. We have a bookstore. And so I would hate to repeat those and at the expense of bringing in something that's missing. So those questions need to be asked of those people, of our board, people at the courthouse as well that work there. People talk to the hotel and engage all of those elements in order to get a better feel of what would be something that they would want. Yeah, that's it. Thank you for now.
I think our city staff is a really other great opportunity to ask their opinion because they're going to be right there. I think we have to consider what kind of foot traffic is going to be more predominantly engaged in this space than making it a destination. In my mind, since we ever started talking about this, I think retail's great, but we already have a lot of great stores downtown. I think something fast casual dining, a sandwich shop or something that's different by the way it's presented. If you think about families grabbing something and going to the park and eating, something that's potable and not, where you're having to sit there and eat it always, something that's good for city staff to walk down and grab a sandwich or a cup of soup or doesn't necessarily have to be a chain. And I think there's a lot of opportunities for us to encourage some entrepreneurs, to people who've wanted to open something small to bite it off here. I think you've got to be careful about not competing with people that are already in existence, like Biscuit Love across the street, or like you said, bakeries. Let's don't overdo it. Or even a predominantly coffee shop. We have several of those as well. But I think city staff would be another great sector of people to ask. And it's hard to ask the whole city.
Yeah.
But I don't think you'll get the response you need from something like that. Stakeholders.
Totally agree with the sandwich shop or the fast dining. I think, especially given the park there, I think that brings people down to that area. I think that's a great call. One of the things we hear a lot is small grocery. I hear it almost daily. Problem is the margins are horrible in that business, and I just don't know how. I don't know how, especially in a small retail space, you could pull that off there. But something to that effect is something that people always mention. My biggest criteria is I just would want it to be something local. I would say I would like to not have a chain in our city hall retail spaces. I feel like it's pretty important for us to support local business and encourage local business and prioritize those spaces for people who want to do business here, who live here, and who have invested in the community.
Alderman Bagley, Vice Mayor Bagley, excuse me.
So I think we have to be careful, and I think it's, we had talked about doing like a master lease of the whole space out to someone to broker it. So we didn't get into this. Quite frankly, I think we have the propensity to spend an enormous amount of time of us discussing what is the right tenant here, and all of our opinions on that. And I would have them too. I think it's really important we look at the key factors, which is, I think Alderman Brown said it, which is that it needs to be, this is a public building. We have and Alderman Caesar and Alderman Blanton are at the DFA meetings quite regularly, as I am, and I missed the last one. But our local tenants are getting squeezed. When I say local tenants, I mean, the ones that I don't know, if you walked down Main Street 10 years ago and you saw, and I'm gonna say this, and they're probably still there or in a different variety, but like the Christmas ornament shop, right? That used to be there. It was like all Christmas ornaments. Do you remember that shop?
Toy store.
And then there was a toy store. Like they're different, like all these shops. And so I think we're seeing a bit of an erosion. We're dealing of these kind of businesses that are having to, getting squeezed out. And we're looking at that in the preservation plan and some different tools on how to handle some of that more broadly. But I do think that we have a really unique opportunity to not interfere with the general marketplace of downtown by looking at some creative ways to foster possibly one or two of these bays to those type tenants, whether that be, and if we're having someone else manage it, it doesn't matter. I'm going to say this, and I don't want people to go I don't want this to turn to like the antique boothy place. But I do think there could be a creative solution, and I would want DFA definitely to be engaged. But, I mean, when we go to those DFA meetings, these tenants are having, it is a huge, huge issue. And we're already hearing it from residents because the tenancy on Main Street's becoming, more mall than downtown. So I really want that to be a focus, as Alderman Brown said. I think if you go back and look at the DNA surveys, New York Deli was like the top response from 2 years ago. So I know DNA, and Bob's not here anymore, but I think Bob did a survey, Ravner, with DNA specific, or maybe it was Lynn. Anyway, there is a less than 3-year-old survey asking about tendencies from DNA. So I wish staff should ask. We don't need to recreate that wheel. But I would just say, let's just get the board of mayor and aldermen possibly stay out of really getting prescriptive, find the right professional, and two, we want this to be activated to tourists as well. So we want this kind of, that's how it's going to be funded. I mean, City Hall staff is not going to pay the rent by buying, munchies. So we've got to think about the actual revenue generating.
It's a pretty hungry group.
I know. Maybe they will. That's a lot of snacks. But anyway, those are my 2 cents. I think the main thing I want, this is a public building. We really went a long ways to get this space really creative. It needs to be local, and I think that's what the community wants. I think that's what the community will love, that aspect of it, if it's a primary focus of us doing this. What that looks like, I think you let the market kind of dictate that and let our professional, kind of hone in. I definitely would want to say hey, let's do a florist. We need a florist shop downtown, and then, we don't need to be saying that. We need to let the market decide who thinks they can make money there, and then hopefully they're locally owned and not a chain. Can we put those kind of requirements on it?
I think you absolutely can, and that's what we're looking for. I think getting the right real estate professional plugged in with some of the guidance we had tonight, and they're going to bring to us, to you, that mix. It's not going to be one at a time. It's going to be, the way I think we envision it, is you're going to get sort of a package of it's 2 or 3 or whatever it is, and how they've tried to balance that local and the types and how it fits with both what the market wants, but also what's the right fit for our space right near that park. I mean, it's a great opportunity. And I think getting the right person on that can help us, but the guidance you're giving us tonight is really helpful about that local feel, maybe something in the fast casual dining, but that
then I would say add that provision.
In the local piece.
But however you all feel that.
We've got to get through the meeting tonight, so Alderman Potts, go ahead quickly.
Yeah, I'll just put one comment in there. It sounds like we're almost describing a Puckett's Market in Delhi. So maybe we need to talk to a local owner when you talk about small grocery.
Anybody else?
Y'all missed it. I said, if you'll fund me, I'll open a small restaurant.
Let's finish up the presentation and get with Mark, and I think there's some good marching orders there. I think that one of the things I heard was from a number of people was not necessarily competitive with existing businesses
Yeah. And local.
and local.
We are hiring an outside firm.
Great.
To bring those proposals back to us, and we can sit up here and make this, so somebody doesn't want this thing or that thing, we can sit up here for hours. Hours, because we have sat up here for hours
We're
on
getting
something
there.
other that's as simple as this right here is. Take the people that we hire and tell them to bring it back to us then. That's, I'm sitting there.
Okay.
All right, we need to keep moving. We've got
One-
a lot
one-
on the agenda.
One more
One last
detail.
thing before turning it over to Mark. Addressing changes. So the new tenants, depending on how many there will be, will get new addresses on 3rd Avenue, somewhere between the 115 and 119 range because of the addresses on the opposite side of the street right there. And City Hall will be getting a new address because we are turning the main entrance back to the square. And the addressing manual requires that the main address be on the same side of the building as the front facade facing the street for public safety reasons. So, $299 is a little bit of an ode to $17.99. It had to be between $231 and $305, so $299, public square. So we plan to advertise next week through the end of the year, go through that RFQ process, and then come back in spring. Great feedback. Thank you very much.
Just don't, say something, don't add any new materials with addresses on them.
Right.
Well, knowing now is important, so we ramp up for that,
address, there you
for the new address.
Yeah, add that.
You could do 228, that it will be built in the 228th year the city of Franklin has been in.
It needs to be above 231, unfortunately. I was lobbying for 227 because we'll open it in 27. But that's not how the numbers roll, unfortunately.
224?
All right, Kelly, if you can go to I got it actually. Have you driven drive? Okay, thanks.
231, our neighbor.
All right. So, good evening. Thank you again for the time this evening for both of these items. I'm going to run through this rather quickly. This is a recap of what the City Hall block redevelopment project is about. We have a new building that's about 97,000 square feet, 3 stories, underground parking garage with about 200 spaces. There'll be an improved community plaza at the square, 3rd Avenue streetscape elements, a 1-acre park that we've discussed, and upgraded utilities throughout the development. Let's go to the next one, please. So by means of a construction update, the site is broken up into 2 areas. There's Area A, which is generally under the building itself, and then Area B, which is under the park area. The pictures in front of you are from October of this year through November and November of this year. The piers in Area A have all been constructed. As you can see in the picture of the November 2025 picture, you can also see the columns coming out of the ground. Next week, they'll be starting the pour of the parking garage slab. So that'll be under the Area A as well. So lots of progress going on there. Next slide, please. So Area B, sorry about that. There are 18 piers left to be poured in place. They should be done by the end of next week. There's a total of 172 piers for both areas A and B. Next slide, please. Thank you. So, kind of a review of the ERPs that we've gone through. ERP 1 and 2 were originally estimated at over $30 million. The actuals were 27.5. We did have to do an additional work authorization of about $2.4 million that Eric had sent out an email earlier today about. We had a lot of subsurface conditions that were unforeseen and had to deal with that. We expect the cost for that's actually going to be about $1.5 million.
And by subsurface, we mean we just had to go deeper with the pilings. We didn't hit rock as quickly as we had expected, so we had to go deeper to get what we needed.
Some of the rock was not in good enough shape to put piers on. We have received bids for ERP3. They're reviewing those right now and performing interviews. They seem to be tracking really well. We got a lot of good competition on them, but they're tracking at or below what the anticipated costs are. I can't speak to what that number is going to be until they finish all that work. That should be done by the second week of December, when we should have that finalized. Let's see what else on this one. And that's it for that one. If you can go to the next one. And this is the financial update. As you can see on the bottom of the page, we did add that roughly $4 million to the adjusted GMP, which is now $94.7 million. To give you an update, as far as design, as of earlier this month, we've spent about $7 million to date. And then construction, we've spent about $8.5 million to date. Next slide. And that is it. Happy to answer any questions.
Alderman Brown?
We had a contingency for subgrade conditions that we weren't aware of.
We do. We used it, and we're adding to it.
Okay, so this is above and beyond the contingency.
This is inclusive of that, but yeah, it's beyond what we had built in there originally. But fortunately, we had 3.2 million and under project budget going into that. So we're probably going to use about half of it to address the additional depth of the pilings.
Vice Mayor?
Notice that the completion is the fall of 2027 now on this timeline.
Pardon me?
The fall of 27?
Yes. We've been saying the fall of 27. We're hoping
Late
for
summer and
better.
fall has been our target.
Yeah, that's been the target.
I had heard summer. But
That's our hope.
That's a prayer.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Okay, we'll keep moving on. We got a lot to do. Resolution 2025-88, authorizing the City of Franklin to issue GO bonds in the aggregate principal amount of not to exceed $118 million. And also Resolution 2025-90, authorizing the issuance of not to exceed $118 million in aggregate principal amount of general obligation bonds in the City of Franklin, Tennessee, making provision for the issuance, sale, and payment of said bonds, establishing the terms thereof and the disposition of proceeds therefrom, and providing for the levy of taxes for the payment of principal, premium, if any, and interest on the bonds. Wow. Christine.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My presentation does relate to both of these resolution 2025-88 and 2025-90. The next item, they are both related to the steps to authorize the issuance of the next GO bond, general obligation bond issue for the city of Franklin. Some of my information will look familiar. Our Budget and Finance Committee heard this information at their October meeting, but the city also issued its most recent bond issue. We closed at the end of March of this year, so some of this will, the process will sound familiar to you. The projects that are to be funded by the next bond issue, the fire apparatus, we've done in every general obligation bond issue since 2017. We have had pieces of fire apparatus, as you've heard, that the fire apparatus has got more expensive over time. It also takes more years to get those after orders are placed. So these are 3 pieces of replacement apparatus that were actually ordered almost a year ago, and we anticipate that they will be received in calendar year 2027. And so those are projected for this 2026 bond issue. We have also included major road resurfacing. This program is managed by our streets department. They have, on an annual basis during the paving season, which is from late spring. They usually get done in the late fall, mid to late fall, here in this part of Tennessee. But they have done major road resurfacing from bond proceeds. This money, $7.5 million, is for 2 paving seasons, calendar year 2026 and 2027. The next project is the Pearl Bransford Park, also Robinson Lake. We know that once those projects are finished, they will essentially be one project, one park. But for purposes of bond funding, we did go ahead. We have issued funds in the 2025 bond issue for Pearl Bransford Park. Robinson Lake, that construction contract came in right after we got that bond put together. So So both, the 15 million is to finish up the debt funding for that project. The next two projects are Long Lane Road improvements and Church Street Road improvements that have been part of the 10-year CIP. They both, this is early stages of those projects. Of course, many road improvement projects go through phases that take time to get to construction. Of course, you usually typically spend more money in construction, but both of these projects are to the point that the city engineer recommends funding right-of-way acquisition design over the time frame of the 2026 bond projects would be utilized. Finally, the major project for this bond project or bond list is the new city hall. The 85 million is what would be funded from bond proceeds. There is additional funding that's cash funded. However, this is all of the debt that's anticipated for this project would be funded in the 2026 bond issue, which totals a little over $117 million of projects to be funded from this issuance. We do have our bond financing team. This is the same from the last bond issue. We do have Bass, Berry & Sims as they do write our tax exempt opinion for these projects. PFM is our financial advisor. We will be asking for ratings from Moody's and Standard & Poor's. And that process, we have done the preliminary stages now, but we do anticipate going to them early, or they'll be working with us on a call meeting early part of January to obtain ratings, ask for ratings again. We do have U.S. Bank as our paying agent. Our underwriter is yet to be determined. We do this as a competitive sale, and when we actually accept bids on one, we send out all of our documents. We ask the market to consider buying our bonds. We take bids, and the underwriter with the lowest interest rate is awarded our bonds. So we will know who that underwriter will be, most likely in the schedule at the end of January. The security for the bonds is the full faith and credit of the City of Franklin. This is the strongest security, the strongest pledge that a local or a state government can put. It's for the City of Franklin, our credit ratings are AAA from two agencies, so it's extremely strong, but it's also a very strong credit for the investors. It results in the lowest interest rate that we can possibly receive in the bond market conditions on that day of pricing. So it's the strength of this credit that really impacts the savings to our residents when they are repaying these bonds over a period of time. It is, like I said, a full faith and credit pledge, all legally available revenues of the general fund. It's very, very strong. It's typically thought of as property taxes that are levied every year that go to repay this debt. This is something that part of the security for the bonds is that there are avenues of recourse. We certainly would not expect that, and you'll hear it to happen, but there are avenues of recourse for the investors should a general obligation bond not be repaid on time. In the state of Tennessee, there's actually a forward look in that the state, when they review our budget on an annual basis, they make sure that all local governments are repaying their debt that's due in that fiscal year. That's required for budget approval. But also, should a governing body not appropriate, and perhaps be in a state that's not as fiscally sound as Tennessee, there is a legal recourse in the court system for investors to be repaid. Just some key elements of these two authorizing resolutions. It is identified in Tennessee Code. It is for these general obligation city projects. The not to exceed amount that's established in the resolutions is $118 million. We do have flexibility to adjust the par amount below $118 million based on market conditions on the day in which we take those bids. We will reduce our bond size down to an amount that will only fund the projects that we need and to pay cost of the issuance itself. This is an estimate of what the debt service would look like. This actually is from market rates a couple of months ago. We looked at it earlier this month, and Actually, interest rates have gone a little bit in our favor. It's about, actually, we were right at 4% as the true interest cost based on rates a couple of weeks ago. We were closer to 4.50 back later in the summer. Something I would point out to you that while the final maturity date is 2051, that's 25 years out, you can see how how these different time periods are scheduled, that we do what we call front-loaded debt service, in that we really look at each project and what we want to amortize that piece of the bond issue. So our fire engines, our major road resurfacing is amortized shorter. And then City Hall is going to be our only 25-year amortized project. Pearl Bransford Park, as well as the Church Street and Long Lane, are on 20 years. So that's why the debt service there in fiscal 29 through 36 is higher than the last few years, the amortization, because we really tailor repaying the debt service to the assets themselves. And being so precise in that structuring gives us a debt service schedule that looks like this. I just wanted to show you on an estimated basis what the debt service for the City of Franklin will look like. The blue is our current debt service. For our current bonds, we actually, as of 6/30/2025, we have $132 million of outstanding general obligation debt with a final maturity of 2045. And so you look at that blue and we start stair-stepping down. And paying principal quickly allows those stair steps to form. Places that do what you would call pushing out the debt service, pushing out principal, they actually stair step up, and we're stair stepping down. We do have a couple bond issues paying off in 2027. We have some others that will be paying off, but certainly you can see we stair step in the existing debt service, and when we put that new debt service, you can see the new stair step. Yes, we do extend the debt service out to 2051, but we still stair step down over time. And we do know there's plans for additional debt service, especially for road projects in the next several years. We don't project a bond issue in 2027, most likely in 28, but there's some timing on some things that we don't know exactly on. But you can see from this graph the plan for how debt service is laid out over the next several years.
And just to add to that, we have less than 40%, more in the 30% range of debt in your 10-year CIP. So you are not overly dependent on debt, but you use it strategically to help you do this and help achieve projects, especially projects with long-term benefit to the community. So that's what we're trying to make sure we continue to do. The general obligation debt we issued earlier this year was the first general obligation debt we've issued in nearly 6 years. So we use the tool strategically, we use it judiciously, but it also is an important component in delivering projects to the community as well. So appreciate the hard work that Christine, the finance team, put into helping us prepare and think through the best way to use strategically use debt.
Thank you. I'll just conclude with our timeline for the 2026 issuance. We're here on November the 25th to discuss the proposal. We'll ask for your consideration on December the 9th to approve those two resolutions, and would move forward with, after that point in the new year, to go into the credit rating agencies early part of January, go out into the public market with documents later into January once those ratings are finalized, and we would look to close sometime in mid-February, maybe early February, but I think mid-February is most likely, and those funds would be received. We have been, of course, spending the money, as my colleague Mark was showing on the City Hall project, based upon the reimbursement resolution that the board approved back in May. We are accounting for the City Hall project, and we'll be able to reimburse the city with bond proceeds when this bond issue closes for expenses that have occurred since early May until we close in February. So we are cash-wise floating that liquidity until we close in February. Mr. Mayor, those are my prepared remarks, if there's any questions.
I think we're good. Thank you, Christine. Excellent job. Okay, we're going to go to items 8 and 9. We're going to tie those together. Change order City of Franklin contract 2025-0174 with Garney Construction for the Ewingville Drive emergency 48-inch FRP repair in the amount of $1,452,381.52, and also the Hobus Ewingville repair.
Hi there. So you may recognize this fella with me. Dylan is moved over to our side. So he's our fiscal manager in charge of all things money.
We made him grow a beard, though.
We did. That was a requirement. So he takes care of the money now, so I can do what I love to do, which is fix pipes. So we're going to talk about that. You got that right? Okay. All right. So kind of to go over a timeline of kind of how this entire thing has happened throughout the ages, kind of really. So June of 2014, if you remember, it was a little bit predated some of you. That was our first Hobos break. That was in the area across from Pinkerton Park, across the river, kind of if you go down the river by that landscaper. And we thought that was an anomaly. We didn't think that was a big deal. We were a little naive, and we replaced it with Hobos pipe. So that was a smaller failure. That was about 230 feet. We attributed it to kind of like a stream that we thought, like an underground spring that might be in that area. And then 2017 happened, and that was the big one behind Chestnut Bend. So that was the one that we'd fixed the spot, and then it just kept going, and it never stopped, it seemed like. So that was a bit... we ended up lining that pipe underneath the river, which was we're still Brian and I are still really happy. It was a big project for us. And then most of the area all the way down toward the backside of the wastewater plant near the new bridge. So all of that has been replaced with ductile iron. In fall of last year is when we got another call from Chestnut Bend that there was a sinkhole that formed, and we held our breath, but it was not as serious as we thought it was. We'll get into that in a little bit. So then jump into this year in April, lots of rains. There was a resident at Ewingville that called us with a sinkhole behind their property as well. That was when we discovered the most recent break. So to kind of bring us up, we did a lot of kind of cost comparisons. The crew that was doing Lewisburg was going to move over and do Hobos, so we kind of had to wait a little bit to have that done. So we ended up not ordering, like a emergency rush of delivery of pipe. We got the cheaper pipe that had the lead time. We kind of did those cost comparisons. So that crew moved over. So when the Lewisburg project finished, they moved over and they started on Ewingville. So then, because we had that little bit of rain, so November they started work at Chestnut Bend. We'll talk about that. We finished that, and then they've moved over to starting to Ewingville. So you probably see as you're driving out of downtown a very large dirt pile in the cornfield. That's the pipe repair. And then the most recent schedule that we just got, we had a progress meeting Monday, shows that June of next year is when that project will be finished, if not sooner. So kind of just talking about, this is the Chestnut Bend, and I had pulled an email together and really sent a really good explanation to the Chestnut Bend residents, but I don't know that the rest of you knew what happened. So what happened was when you have a manhole and you have a pipe that goes, you have kind of like a neoprene boot that surrounds that kind of makes that connection between the precast manhole and the pipe, right? That boot is secured by essentially a steel clamp, right? And that had failed. And so we've seen that a couple times in other really deep pipe projects. It's not a commonality that we see. But you see in this picture off on the right side, that's what was happening, is that boot had failed and that had allowed all of that water to just gush in, right? So in a sewer system, we try and minimize the amount of water because that's additional water we have to treat, which is money and chemicals and power and all that sort of stuff for ratepayers to pay. So that was why that started. What happened with that one is you can see the red circle in that manhole when we closed, we kind of did an inside repair and we injected a bunch of grout to kind of solidify the soil around that area. When we did that, it then pushed all of that water, all of that groundwater to this upstream manhole, which is this, you can't see the numbers on here, but the one closer to the pool. So we ended up we pushed the water up to that area, but then we sealed that as well. And we've let it sit for a day or two and didn't see water poking anywhere else out. So I think we're good there. So, they have moved out of that area. We have restored it. It is not completely restored. I want to put that out to the public. They have seeded some of the area, but I don't know if the seed is going to take because it's so late in the year. So they'll be back next spring to continue to seed some more. So this leads us to, obviously, Ewingville. And there's a lot going on this slide, but the colored area is all the lines that we're replacing. We color coded them to make them easier to see. So these 4 pictures are actually from the CCTV inspections that we took. So earlier this year, before we discovered the break, we had done an inspection of all of the HOBOS in our system. So you can see like the red pipe, the area that comes down, that in the 3 and the 9 position, that pipe had cracked longitudinally down the entire area of the pipe, the length of that section of pipe. In the dark blue section, you can see there's another crack there that's letting a lot of groundwater intrusion in. In the green section farther down, there's a very small crack. This one is like vertically, so it's allowing infiltration into those joints. And then this orange section, it's completely, all of that soil you can see has come into the pipe, right? So when Brian and I were looking at this, we could like really kind of spot replace different sections around the pipe. But when we went back to the report we did in 2018, where we first evaluated the system, we looked at the ovality of some of the sections. So ovality is, you have your pipe that's a circle. Ovality is how far it crunches down, right? 5% deflection is what HOBOS allows. You can see I copied some of these Excel tables from the report. You can see some of them are as much as 18 to 20% deflection. So that's it. So we kind of made the call if we can't line those sections of the pipe. There's not a lining company that will warranty a liner. So we made the call to replace them all as well, right? We didn't want to finish this project and then a year later have to come back in and replace it all again. So that was why you'll see as we get into kind of the cost section, there was one small section we were going to line. When we got into it further, we realized we just need to replace all of it. Do you have any questions about this one? Okay. Okay, so the project cost thus far. So we've been bypass pumping, which means we're taking essentially all of that, the flow in that sewer, taking it from one manhole and putting it into another manhole farther down the way. So all that pipe is dry right now. This is the amount of cost that we've incurred. We are working on a change order to move those costs to Garney. So the costs are still going to stay the same. Garney is going to incur those costs rather than us paying for it. Garney is maintaining the pumps right now as far as like if it floods, they're moving them to higher ground, they're refueling them. We figure liability-wise, it would just help if they were paying for it rather than us, that line of kind of separation be a little bit blurred. So that's why you see the cost to be incurred is way less. Temporary construction easements, these have all been secured. This was one of the reasons why we chose to delay the project a little bit, is that we had to, the current easements that are on this line are not sufficient enough for how deep the pipe is. So we had to purchase temporary easements from 5 property owners, the neighborhoods, so Sturbridge neighborhood, and then 4 property owners in there, and then, 3 property owners, and then the Miss Crowell with the cornfield. We have inspection cost. So we have an inspector who's watching that. It's the same inspector who has done all of our previous HOBOS breaks to kind of see similarities. It's really been helpful as far as being that conduit of information back to us, because we're not out there every day to be able to tell us, if there's, kind of anything that we need to be concerned about, anything we need to keep watching out for. The next one is just the Garney work that's about to happen, and so the change order 1 and 2. So the change order 1 is what you're voting on tonight, and that is for the additional pipe that we talked about, that 300 feet that we can't line because there isn't a company that would want to line it. And then we also chose to set up a reclaim bypass. So there's a reclaimed water line that goes right next to this interceptor, goes all the way down to Berry Farms. But we had to take that out of service. So right when we started to bypass pump and we were going to start construction, we had to turn it off, which is right in the middle of the growing season and everyone reseeding, and it did not leave a lot of people happy. So it's a small compared to the overall bypass pumping cost, it's a small cost. We're looking at turning that off since we're kind of seem to be in a rainy season. But what would be the cost to keep it on site to next March to bring it back online again for, we get into that planting season when folks want reclaimed water. Let's see. And then we included a project contingency in here just because, as you just listened to City Hall, right? We don't know when we get this deep into what things are going to look like underneath ground. So we have that in there just in case. Can you go back a minute? So one thing I did want to point out, so change order 2, which you'll see probably at the January board meeting, is going to be, so it's going to be that cost for Garney taking over the bypass pumping, right, which is just going to be a transfer of cost. We also are going to establish a project completion. So when we initially did the contract with Garney and put the specs together, we kind of just needed to get it going so we could get Garney authorized to buy pipe for us to get that moving, right, because it was like a 10-week lead time. What we didn't do is we didn't establish a time to where we can say if you're not done by this time, you're going to start having to pay for our damages. So we're establishing that time. It's an agreed upon time with Garney. It's out there. I think it should be okay, but that's also another reason why we have an inspector is that they're going to assume those costs if they go over time. Let's see. Establishing the project completion. Oh, the other thing was. The work in Chestnut Bend took longer than we thought. When we initially received the schedule, it was 3 days, and it ended up taking 2.5 weeks, I think it was, and you guys were great and patient and everything. We called Garney out on that. There was a lot of errors that were happening with that, and we were pretty angry with that. I was pretty annoyed. So Garney is actually reducing the cost of that manhole repair to half. So it was about a $225,000 repair. They're giving us a credit for half of it. They're giving us bypass pumping for 3 weeks because of that repair when they were not working on Ewingville, and then the second repair that I talked about in that other manhole we're getting for free. So it's not all. It's a lot better than it was. So you'll see that in change order 2. All right, the next one. So this is Chestnut Bend. I got this one morning. I was like, it's pretty. We're not obviously completely done out there. There's a little bit more seeding and restoration. There's some ruts and some debris that we need to do, but it's much better than it was. And then this is Ewingville. They are working on replacing the pipe. So this is the pumps that's in the Sturbridge common area. And then this is the trench that's over near the Cromwell cornfield site. So you can see it's deep. They've got to use 2 trench boxes because it's a 30-foot deep excavation. So they've got to bench out. It just makes it a really mucky area once it rains. All right, so I'll let Dylan talk about this one. Okay.
Alrighty, so on this slide, we're looking at the different funding sources for this updated project cost that we have, and since there was limited information in budget development season, developing this year's budget, as well as, we were just getting an idea of how expansive this price could be while y'all were approving this year's budget. So we took a look at a couple different options. So the first source that you'll see on this chart is budgetary savings. So these are out of the sewer operating fund, and these were funds that were already budgeted towards similar areas of CIPP and the routine replacement and repair that the water department does. So since HOBOS is kind of a top priority right now, those funds are just being shifted from the miscellaneous project costs that they would have gone towards, and we pulled as much as we could to put towards this HOBOS issue. The second source will be payments from the general fund. So the property of the Pearl Park was originally owned by the Water Sewer Fund, and now that a park is being built there, the use will change, but also the ownership of that land will change. So in this fiscal year, changing the ownership, but also the exchanging of funds, since the general fund and water sewer fund are separate, and so compensating the water sewer fund for the new use of the land and the parks taking over. Finally, there's fund balance from the sewer fund. So I worked with the budget and finance teams, and we performed analysis on the sewer operations, the sewer fund in general, as well as they ran the higher level, fund level, and citywide level forecasts and analysis. And so we found that with this $7 million here, that can be supported, and we'll continue to monitor it as we go. And even with this expense, we can still stay above the state required minimum reserves and fund balance, and as well as above the MTAS recommendations. So the next steps, as Michelle talked about, we're hoping that we can return flow to the system in summertime. So closing this out by June 30th would be the best, because that's where all of our funding is getting planned for. So also we'll begin evaluation and prioritization for the remaining Hobos pipe in the system. There was already some analysis done on it, but to determine what can be lined versus what needs to be dug and replaced, we're definitely going to maximize the CIPP lining as the more cost-effective strategy. Then in December, when the next budget amendment starts up, you can expect the presentation of the numbers we just went over on the previous slide. So on the next budget amendment, it'll be recognizing the updated expenses and expected costs of the Hobos project at Ewingville, and then also making sure our funding sources for those are aligned in the budget. Also, looking forward to, after the completion of the Ewingville project, included in that amendment as well, will be funds to start the evaluation and prioritization and getting in there and taking a really good look at what comes next, so we don't get in this situation again. And finally, doing a cost of service analysis, and this will be a look at the rates to make sure that the revenue generated by our rates will provide sufficient funds for not only the broader Hobos replacement strategy, but as well as continue to support our operations and maintain our debt service coverage. So we're open to any questions y'all might have.
One thing we worked, and I compliment staff really hard on, is to try to avoid the issuance of additional debt to complete the repairs. We think we have a path forward to do that. You all had given us some latitude to look at that, but we've worked to try to find that path. It likely, regardless of how we did that, this likely will have some implications for how we look at rates, and we'll have to come back to you on that, because we had a rate plan outlook, I think, all the way out to about 2033, and we'll have to. This is a significant amount to absorb. We're in a good position on fund balance, but you're going to need to look at that with the other things we need to do to run the utility. So stay tuned on that, but appreciate the work that went on so that we did not have to issue additional debt at this stage, but we're going to need to continue to monitor this and give you the longer term plan about other Hobos needs for repair replacement across the system.
Alderman Potts.
Thank you. I've got a question for Michelle, if you don't mind. You had mentioned earlier in the presentation how there was a negative impact on the Berry Farms area about the same time people were starting to seed or overseed for the season and everything like that. And then you also mentioned that coming up in March that you may have to turn it back off. Do you have an estimate, or can you go into a little
the other
bit more
way.
detail?
The other way around.
The other way. So we needed. We set essentially a bypass pump for our reclaim system. So it's taking reclaim from one end of the pipe to the other end of the pipe, so we can keep flow going down to Berry Farms. We're likely going to turn that off though, because it's pumps we've got to maintain and fuel and rent. Since we're kind of in the wet season right now, I don't know that that's reclaim is a large deal, but we'd like to turn that back on in March-ish, April, well, depending on the weather, so we can be able to provide that service back for our folks.
Okay.
But one of the things we're going to look at is the cost of rental, and if we can. Actually, one of the things we talked about was if we continue to keep those on site in case we need it, can we pay a lesser fee if there's not water going through the pipes? So that's just a sidebar, but does that make sense?
It does make sense. And this follows up on a conversation you and I had previously had. I would just ask to be kept looped in on that so I
Yes.
can help to keep both the residents and the commercial consumers in that area informed.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, we'll keep moving along. We're going to go to item 10 is a resolution authorizing the use of competitive seal proposal procurement method for choosing the service provider for banking services. Anybody got questions on that one? Item 11 is resolution 2025-96, a resolution to amend the Franklin Police Department record and towing service rotation policy and agreement. Anybody on that one? Next is City of Franklin Contract 2025-532 with Stagg Luuza LLC for legal representation in a PFAS class action lawsuit on contingency fee basis. You guys got questions on that one? Seeing none, item 13 is City of Franklin Amendment contract number 2025-0247 with Thompson Reuters for removal of a dock module from City High IQ. Any questions on that
Happy
one?
to answer any questions you have. You all are making this so easy. Thank you. We don't need to talk.
And finally, we're going to get to 14, which is draft policies, procedures relating consideration petitions for the creation of real estate infrastructure development districts. Woo!
All right, Mr. Mayor, let me kick this off. Our team's going to step up here too, and Betsy Knotts is going to be helping present that. And let me just give you sort of a setup as we talk about this. What we present to you tonight is a policy framework. This is something we've worked on to draft for your consideration. And it is just that, a policy framework. Each of these proposals will come to you on a issue by issue or a development by development basis. And you will and we will work with that to make those calls, but it's important that you set a framework up front. One of the things we've heard from you is that you want to see a clear definition of achieving considerable community benefit out of the use of these tools. And from that discussion, we've honed in on 4 pillars of those priority areas, and those include exceptional development, infrastructure development, attainable housing, and redevelopment. So we want to look at how those are achieved and create a clear line between what you all are doing, providing, and how it benefits our community more broadly. As a policy framework, I would ask you not to think about specific projects tonight. Think about what you want to achieve by providing this tool. Don't think about how you make a certain project work. Think about how this can justify, document the benefit that you want to see happen. We've gotten good feedback from you. I think you'll see a good amount of streamlining of what we're providing to you, both from a policy standpoint and how we evaluate that benefit. We provide examples, but they are not meant to be mandates. They are just examples of what contributions in those 4 priority areas might look like. And so Betsy's going to take you through that, and our team will be glad to answer questions as you go along as well. So take it away.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm happy to be back presenting this draft policy on behalf of city staff. This definitely has been a team approach. I feel like I've been here multiple times listening to feedback, which we really appreciate, as well as getting input from experts in the industry. I think we've done a pretty good job with that, and I know Vernon has had specific meetings with specific developers related to certain projects that are in the pipeline. So I just want everyone to know that that has all been taken into account when drafting this policy. And before I go through it, I do want to speak to you as counsel to the city. I do want to just remind you that I think you heard this last time from FMS Bonds. They're required to disclose that they do not represent your interests. And we will hear from a lot of folks that do not represent the city's interests, and we will hear comments. And so I just encourage you to review them as objectively as possible. And that's just my obligation as your counsel to remind you of that. we did receive some initial comments from Mr. Rosenberg, I think on Friday, right after this was released. And I did go and look at those pretty detailed. And so I can respond to some of them. I will say that a good majority of them are fine and just kind of a policy call on the board's, it's up to you to decide which way you want to go with this. There are a few that I think are linked to maybe a misunderstanding of our intent and what is in the policy. And so there's probably an opportunity for us to clarify what we have in the policy. And so I'm going to do that as I go through the slides tonight. So I just want to summarize kind of what I've heard over the last 2 years. I've been working with y'all on this. That's that there's not an interest in accelerating growth that just meets minimum standards. So I've heard things like, we are interested as a city in better development, not more. And I think we all know that this is a tool that will accelerate development. And so this policy, as currently drafted, does align with that better, not more kind of philosophy. Obviously, it can be streamlined and tailored even more. And that's why we're here tonight, to get your feedback. But I've heard about attainable housing, that's a priority. I've heard that the need for more infrastructure and ways to fund it, that's not coming out of the property tax base. I have heard the need for more unique development, so utilizing this tool for very special projects. And so that is all embodied in this draft policy. From my perspective as a bond attorney, I think we've also made it clear in this policy that this is going to protect your AAA credit rating that Christine talked about earlier. We are going to utilize a conduit issuer to do special assessment bonds. We are not going to be issuing these bonds directly as a city or using our general obligation pledge at all. They will be secured by special assessment revenues from that district, and there will be some distance between the conduit issuer and the city. You'll see in here, and I'll try to move quickly because I know you have a meeting at 7, we are going to vet developers. That is something we do on the tax increment side all the time. We have borrowed from documents that we use for tax increment financings across the state in very, very large, sophisticated jurisdictions, so none of this is creating something new. This is very common in Tennessee. And then my last point before I dive in is, this is going to cost the city. We've already spent 2 years working on this. We haven't quantified, we haven't been tracking all the time that's been spent working on this. But taking on this tool is going to divert city resources from other projects. And so if that is a priority, that's the board's decision, but I want that to be transparent, because a lot of times it gets said that, all the costs will be reimbursed from special assessment revenues. Well, there is a ceiling. There is a point where it makes the deal not work when there's so many costs. And so I just want you to keep in mind, the city will be in charge of enforcing delinquencies. There will be more audit requirements related to this. The planning department will have more responsibilities. There'll be more front-end work when these petitions are filed. And some of the decisions you need to make are, how fully baked do you want this when it comes to you? Do you want just kind of draft ideas? Because we can make that change easily, but staff will have to deal with the higher volume of requests coming in. And then there will be post-creation district monitoring. So we're going to enter into development agreements with the developers that require certain certain reporting requirements, certain thresholds they need to meet. And so there will be staff time spent monitoring that and reporting back to the board. So I just want that to be clear, that this is not a free, this will cost the city. Hopefully we can get reimbursed. That's the goal. All right, so now I'm going to move quickly. The beginning of the policy basically just lays out the high-level process. This is meant to be an orderly process of collaborating with the developer, the city staff. they're going to be required under this draft policy to submit a notice of intent, which mirrors what we do in tax increment financing. So it's basically just getting all the info you need in front of you to make a decision. And then the draft petition. So the petition is what's legally required. And so in this policy, we ask that it be a draft form submitted first so that the city staff and the developer can kind of work out some details and then bring it to the city in a timely fashion. And so here you'll see include the following: final city approved development plan and or substantially final site plan. So that's one where you can determine whether you want to have something that's been finally approved or if you'd like to have a draft version of that development plan. That's an option there. I don't think the animations are working. No big deal. This is the notice of intent. If you have a copy of the policy, it is Exhibit A. And this is the portion that I said mirrors what we do in tax increment financings. So it's about 5 pages. Essentially, it's collecting contact information for the developer, information about the project so we can make sure it's compliant with some of these legal requirements. And then it asks questions. So will this district be developed in phases? Or is this a one-time thing? How have you interacted with the community and gotten their feedback? What kind of collaborator are you with our community? How will this support the vision of the city's land use plan? Does this impact schools or emergency services? If it does, how? Have you talked to anyone about that? And then lastly, the municipal benefits commitments, which I think Eric did a good job summarizing. These are just examples that we included in here. We followed, I think it was Alderman Brown's suggestion to attach them as a guide, but they're not a required checklist. And so developers know on the front end kind of what the priorities of the city are and what types of commitments would fulfill those priorities, but they could be creative and come up with something outside that box. That's not what's required. I think originally it was presented as a scorecard, and that's been changed on purpose.
And essentially what we're looking at with each of these is a pretty simple assessment. Does it fully address that topic? Does it partially address that category? Or does it not at all? So as a general concept, I think it'd be great to see multiple ones addressed. Maybe get a minimum one fully addresses one of the 4 pillars, and maybe an additional and partial on another category. But so that you can clearly draw a line between what you're providing and what you're getting as a defined, clear community benefit.
Yes, and one thing I didn't mention at the outset is the whole point of that is to give you a framework to make these judgments. Because if we are about better development, not more, we are going to have to deny some petitions, most likely. And we're going to have to say why. And so this provides that framework and that basis that you can put on the record for why you denied or approved a petition. So the fancy animations are gone, but this is your 4-page form of petition. And essentially it just tracks the law. So there's nothing really out of the ordinary in here. Again, it has in here that requirement about a final city approved development plan, which we can always change to just a draft plan if that's what the board prefers. Okay. So then after, there's a 60-day requirement. So it's a max 60 days. So staff and developer go over this notice of intent and this draft petition and hopefully work out the kinks. They've got a max 60 days, and then developer can do whatever he or she wants, whether the staff is in agreement or not. So they can file their petition. And once it's filed, then we need to put notice out on the website, summarize the petition, and hold a public hearing, the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. And so the whole point of this process is to avoid having multiple special called meetings. So we can make sure it's filed in a timely manner that allows it to be heard at a regular meeting. And I think as a suggestion, have the developer notifying all the residents about the district by mail. That's, again, something that can change. If you want city staff to spend time doing that, they can do that. There's no requirement in the law that either party do it. Just, they have to be notified. And then here's the actual public hearing. So after we've put notice on the website and we have this petition and they've worked it out with staff, and if the petition is in really good shape, it might turn around in a week. It doesn't have to take 60 days. So this is a fairly quick process. This is not overly bureaucratic. I do policies around the state for lots of jurisdictions. Some of them are extremely bureaucratic, where you have multiple committees and it goes on for months. This can be done as quick as a month and as long as 5 months, and that's it. So you've got a 1 to 5 month kind of range to get this done. Notice of creation of district, again, this is where the developer would file after they've received approval by resolution of their district. They would file it in the Williamson County Register of Deeds office. This is not a legal requirement. This is a policy requirement. We're following the lead of Bristol. They kind of set this requirement out there as a transparency requirement, and it's similar to what's done with CPACER. Again, if you don't want to do that, we don't have to. It can also be done by city staff instead of the developer. So this is where we get into more the financing policies and the municipal benefit guidelines policies. And so the financings, from my perspective, kind of memorialize what we've been discussing, which is having a conduit issuer be the main issuer of any kind of special assessment bonds. There's no requirement in the policy. I think Mr. Rosenberg maybe raised this as an issue, but there's no requirement in the policy that the bonds be issued for less than 30 years. I just put in there, because we are a fiscally conservative AAA entity, that if it doesn't need 30 years, we don't need to be giving 30 years. That's all. But if it needs 30 years, we can give 30 years. Pretty simple. Specific terms of each debt issuance, in contrast to what Christine was talking about, these will be negotiated by a financing team, which would be through the conduit issuer. They will be able to negotiate and choose an underwriter. They will have their own bond counsel, financial advisor, and there will be a trustee that handles the special assessment revenues. And another comment before I do the value to lien real quick, which I think I'll hand over to Eric, was the term of the assessment. So the policy is flexible in that it says we do prefer reimbursement. We do prefer that the infrastructure be approved and then the revenues flow to the developer. But that's not the only way that it can be done. If there's a need to do construction bonds on the front end, that can be done. Obviously, there's more risk that if the infrastructure is not done and there's a default, that can happen. And so value to lien. I don't know, Eric, if you want to.
I'll touch on that, but Betsy, feel free to chime in.
Sure.
We are stating it in the policy as a strong preference to the 3-to-1 as a goal. I really would urge you to push for that. The state minimum by law is 2-to-1. Folks, we're a AAA credit. We didn't get a AAA credit by doing the bare minimum. Mr. Rosenberg provided you with a list of examples from the state of Texas. You do the average of that, it was, I think, 3.5-to-1. You look at a AAA city like Austin, it was over 4-to-1. So this is not an extraordinary ask. And I think you ought to be confident in asking for a higher ratio than the bare minimum. And I think that speaks to the quality of what we want to achieve. And I think it's just good, strong financial planning. That you're not just doing the bare minimum, that you are saying we ought to do and we ought to expect more.
And it is just a preference. There is flexibility built into it. There is nothing in here that says it has to be achieved every single time. It is a goal. For municipal benefit guidelines, the main thing to keep in mind here is these are samples and they're attached as Exhibit D. For these, they can either be paid for with special assessment revenues if They have a nexus to the district. Obviously, we can't do anything illegal, so we can't be using special assessment revenues for a road across the county. So for the road across the county, we would have to use private funds. So that's a distinction that needs to be clear. We're not saying you can use special assessment revenues for municipal benefits that do not directly benefit the district. We are focusing on those 4 pillars, like Eric said, which is what I've heard from this board: the extraordinary benefits, attainable housing, enhancement of infrastructure, and redevelopment. And like Eric said, to qualify essentially for a staff recommendation, a positive staff recommendation, we're hoping that at least one category will be touched on and reach that full credit level, and another category at least just touched on. It doesn't have to reach a full credit type level. And so my animation's not working, but here's the, I know, Exhibit D. We've got 4 pages. I'm not going to go through all of this with 20 minutes left, but I will emphasize that they are sample commitments that are listed. This is not a checklist. And for the first category, extraordinary benefits, you'll see things like priority areas in the master plans, really extraordinary collaboration between the developer and the community. I've heard this term, I didn't know it until I started learning about this kind of niche area of financing, and it's called a cram down. And so we don't want to cram down where they show up with their team and just say, this is how we're doing it, and y'all just have to rubber stamp it. We want collaboration and, coming to an agreement on something. Infrastructure to support exceptional development, preservation of historic structures. There's all kinds of information in there. Attainable housing, I would defer to Vernon on this. This is more his area of expertise. But again, to get full credit, you've got to have quantitative commitments that align with something like this. And I live in West Haven, and my understanding is they have some deed restricted homes even there, as well as a school and a fire station. And I mean, it's an amazing example of what can be done. Enhancement of infrastructure, don't need to go into that too much detail, and redevelopment. This basically says if the area is in a census tract, and they could meet at least one or more redevelopment commitments, then they would meet the full criteria of it. And so I think there probably are some areas of Franklin that would qualify for this. I'm just going to blaze through. The transparency hasn't been controversial. It basically just memorialized what the board has already seen. Community input, this can be tailored. Again, this is not a legal requirement. So this is developers having at least one community meeting where they get input from the public. And my understanding is that usually happens at a neighborhood meeting.
Yeah, our thought would be to just layer it on top of what already happens in the development process. And if there is a desire or potential desire to pursue this tool, that would just be articulated as part of the process.
Sure.
Sure. You want to go ahead and make it now? Is that
Yes,
okay?
because whenever I was looking at this, whenever it was brought to us one of the times before, it turns out that you levy and collect an annual assessment on each residential property for a period of no more than 12 years. This was in Bristol, Tennessee. But that means that everybody that buys any of this property or buys a house on it has to pay an extra assessment every single year. And so, to me, that just seems like that they are paying for infrastructure or whatever. But I mean, but that it means that, in other words, you have to pay a lot more money than you would have to pay if you were just buying a house.
Do you want me to keep going real quick, or that's fine?
Okay, go ahead and then we'll go back to Dave.
Say that that's the program. That's what we're talking about. That's the main part of the program. And people keep telling us, make new development, make new residents pay, and quit making the taxpayers here pay for all that infrastructure. It's part of the program. We're trying to answer that in the IDD to help fund the infrastructure with the people who are causing and buying the homes. So that's the program. I just want to go on. Exactly.
They have to pay an extra.
Assessment.
Yeah.
Yes,
And that's
correct.
the program. Yeah, that's the program.
Yeah.
So, in other words, if you were, I mean, this is not true in Franklin now, but if you were buying a $400,000 home, then in addition to what you normally would be paying for that, you would be paying this extra assessment.
Exactly, and
Only
that's
in that area.
only
Yeah.
in that area and only there. That's the program, and people keep saying, help new development pay for itself. That's the program. Yeah.
Go ahead, Betty.
Okay, I'll just blaze through. So annual reporting is required in this policy. Again, that's not a legal requirement. We just put that in. We made it annual so it wouldn't be completely burdensome, and that would be city staff coming in and going over the different districts and the infrastructure that's being put in at them. Last but not least, special assessment billing. This is very unique to Franklin, and I just want to make sure everyone's aware. We do have to have an agreement with the county to collect these special assessments for us. And so we're in the works with the county, and a potential issue has come up through the county trustee and their attorney. And so it would affect every district. It might require a cleanup bill. And so that may delay this a little bit, but we're hoping we can come to a quick conclusion on that doesn't require that. But I just wanted everyone to be aware that that is going on in the background, and the county trustee will be the one collecting these special assessments, and she will need to upgrade her software in order to do that. So flexibility, you can amend these policies, you can waive them. So in your resolution approving a district, you could say, we waive 3.3, we waive section 3.2 because we think this is an amazing project and this is our reasoning. So it's not like you have to adhere to every single provision of the policy every single time. And then administrative fees, we've kind of already talked about the cost to the city and whether 5% will cover it or not. We will find out. And so the next steps essentially is to get to a policy that everyone is happy with as much as we can, and then approve it. And then come up, I think the county attorney wants to do a separate interlocal agreement, Shauna. And so we would have a new city-county interlocal agreement related to the collection of special assessments. And so the arrangement that the city would have with the county trustee and the fees that would be paid to do that work for us. And then finally, a resolution approving the conduit issuer as the main issuer of special assessment financings. And that's all I have.
I've got one public speaker. Go ahead.
I was
Mr.
just going to, again, policy framework. What we've tried to give you is a tool to define that clear public benefit. And we've honed in on what we've heard from you, which is those 4 pillars: exceptional development, infrastructure, contribution, construction, attainable housing, redevelopment. And, each of these project by project is going to be a negotiation. But having this framework really gives you a place to go for what you're going to say yes to, but just importantly, what you're going to say no to. Because you're going to have a lot of people request this. It's sort of an intersection of where development wants to look at this as another component of their financing strategy. They may want to allocate it to certain things that we might typically see. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's just something to look at versus what you want to see as a city, as a community, a clearly defined significant benefit that we do not receive but for doing this. And so there's going to be some tension there. We'll work hard to negotiate something that is fair to all involved, but this framework plays an important role in kind of defining those parameters and giving us that guidance. And so that's really what we'd love to see and get from you today. This is an important opportunity. There is some merit to getting something out there that you think is pretty good. Nothing's going to be perfect. We'll learn as we do some of this. But if you want to go down this path, I think we've given you a pretty well-developed policy. We've worked hard to make it less rigid, a little more streamlined than what you saw before, but it also has to have some meat on the bone too. So we welcome feedback and questions and other discussion and guidance from you.
I'm going to go ahead and I have one speaker that wants to speak, Janet Curtis, and I'll give her 2 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Janet Curtis. I live in Franklin, Tennessee.
There you go, thanks.
I want to highlight a pattern we've seen across the country, one that should give us serious pause as Tennessee considers adopting special financing districts similar to Florida's community districts. In Austin, a major developer collapsed after expanding too fast with too little capital. Projects were left half-built, neighbors were stuck with abandoned structures, and residents had no recourse. The community inherited the consequences of private speculation. Florida has experienced something similar for years through its CDD systems. Developers issue large amounts of debt, control the board, and set long-term financial obligations that homeowners inherit. When the housing market slows or the developer pulls out, these districts default. Residents are left paying for unfinished roads, failed amenities, and special assessments that can escalate into foreclosure. Tennessee's proposed infrastructure development districts combine the vulnerabilities of both systems. They allow developer-controlled boards, they permit debt to be issued based on future growth, and they shift risk onto homeowners and counties if the developer fails. Without strict oversight, solvency requirements, and strong resident protections, we risk creating districts that can collapse just as speculatively as Austin's projects, or fail into the same debt traps and defaults we see in Florida. The warning is clear. When private ambition is financed with public risk, communities pay the price. Tennessee should not adopt a system that repeats the mistakes other states have now struggling to recover from. Unfortunately, this is something that we've seen. I've got other incidents here. I've sent out letters to all of you about this. This is something that you really have to spend a lot of time researching and discussing before it gets settled. Thank you.
Thank you. And back to the board then. We're ready to go to the next item? Okay. Who's first? Alderman Brown, you're recognized.
All right. I fully agree with your assessment of sort of why we're trying to do. I mean, I think your statements about what we're asking for and all that, I think is very fair. Those are the 4 areas that we have had prioritization on. And we definitely don't want this as an accelerator to growth, but rather differentiator growth. So I think that was all very fair. I still just think, though, we are really over-architecting this whole entire thing. We've got a state law that's on the books, and what we've really been asking for is something that would allow us to implement that law, but then do some things that we really want to try to do in the city. One is drive more for-sale product. That's what this does. It doesn't play in the for-rent space. It's a for-sale product. To direct growth, to say this is where we were going to put IDDs. These are not a legal right. These are discretionary. So we have the ability to say, we don't even want to use IDDs in this area of town. We want to direct them in this space. We want to specifically target areas of growth, which I think is one of the reasons I love this tool the most, is actually gives us a chance to decide where we want growth to happen. We want it to be able to achieve benefits that we can't otherwise, like affordable housing, attainable housing. We just don't have any way of doing that. We want to elevate the product for sure. I want to be able to say that it's not enough what you're bringing us is mediocre. And so I think all of those things are reasons that we do want to try to get a policy. The way this stands now, I really am doubtful that anybody would take advantage of this. I really don't think so. First of all, I think it's tied too closely to zoning. That's one problem that I see with it. You're right. These are development agreements. These are development contracts. These are opportunities for discussion. I think the minute that you start tying it to zoning, you kill that negotiation. You kill that opportunity. It's especially by having final site plan. We're asking them to go all the way through a process and then sit down with them and say, now here's what we'd really like to see coming out of this. Now go spend some money and go all the way back and redo this whole thing all over again. That seems very counter to what we're trying to accomplish by trying to drive some cost out and get some things to our benefit. We need to have this at sort of a more of a draft stage, more of a initial conversation around what is it that we want from this development to happen, and do we want this to happen if we're going to grant this tool to them, not having it come in as a final plan. I think the other thing that sort of the other big one I have is the reimbursement versus construction. Reimbursement is only going to be for people who have lots of cash, and I don't think that's who we really are trying to invite to do business here in Franklin. I think we're trying to help see more local developers, more smaller developers, and those are going to be construction type bonds. They're not going to be reimbursement. They don't have that money up front. And so I think by the nature of saying it's in the reimbursement space, and I heard you say you could be both, but I think by saying it's in the reimbursement space, we're basically pushing towards developers that we don't really, it's not the priority of who we want in this city. We want to try to help the local folks that want to build great communities and great neighborhoods in our community for sure. I hear you on the 2-to-1, 3-to-1. I think Wall Street's buying 2-to-1. I think Texas has a lot of examples of where they've, and you know Texas well, Betsy, so I'm preaching to the choir probably, but I think there's a lot of times where it's consistently waived in Texas because it just isn't workable. So I appreciate the idea that it's not set in stone, but it's something that maybe we have a target, but at the end of the day, I don't want a hard, fast number because we're going to sit here constantly saying to ourselves, well, not this time, not this time. And I think the exceptions are where we're trying to get away from. And maybe one of the last things I'll certainly say here is, well, maybe two more things. One is I do understand the need for a criteria to guide us. I could see using that as a way of saying, how do I evaluate for myself whether or not what I want out of this development? Am I getting something out of this development? Where I continue to get a little concerned is, and it even says in here, staff recommendation. There's too many times when we are at odds with a staff recommendation. And that may not be because it doesn't necessarily check all the boxes, but maybe the staff wants something different out of that development than this board wants out of this development. And what concerns me is that staff would do that evaluation using those sheets, come in here and say, staff doesn't recommend this because of, and then this board is suddenly at odds like we are from time to time on Envision Franklin or any other kind of ordinances. And I think that guidance needs to be for us to be able to say, what is it that we want to get out of this? What is it that we think we can get out of it? And have the opportunity for that negotiation to be able to happen without a whole lot of rules that kill that negotiation. That probably concerns me the most, is that we won't even see them or have a chance for that conversation. At the end of the day, the law exists. Public comment aside here, the law exists. Somebody could petition us tomorrow, and this board has to see that. Whether staff wants them to, you said it very well, whether staff likes it or not, they're coming to this board, not to staff. They're coming to this board for us to approve a petition. And we've got to be able to start being ready to hear these and apply something. And we're still not there yet, and I know that they're chomping at the bit to get in here, and it concerns me that somebody's just going to say, I've had enough, I'm going to go ahead and petition this board, and we're going to get them without having the ability to really understand what we're trying to accomplish. So those are my top comments. I'm sure there's some smaller ones in there. I appreciated your point that a lot of it was guidance, but there's some real concerning things still in this document that would concern me.
And I just wanted to respond real quickly to you could receive a petition any day. Currently, under the law, you're not a host municipality because we do not have an agreement with the county related to collecting special
Fair enough.
assessments.
Got it.
So until that is in place, we can receive petitions and review them and give them conditional approval, but just know that it's not really an option until we have that agreement in place.
Do we have an agreement in place? Okay, that's good to know. That's good.
Vice Mayor.
A few things. I think, and you said that we could really, if we wanted to, we could kind of throw the book out on the criteria if ultimately. So, I mean, to me, I think I would like us to start with a more stringent kind of criteria, knowing that, of course, we don't want to like go into it thinking that we're going to throw the criteria out but knowing that that's a possibility, because we're really wading into uncharted territory here on this, and there's a lot of dangers to it, frankly, that we can always say no to, but there's a lot of business risk for the people doing business in our community if they expect it to be something that then it is not once we get up here and we realize, oh, wait a second, there's no real public benefit coming from this request. They're just financing their impact fees and infrastructure that they would have had to have done anyway, and that probably would have done anyway. I've gotten calls from people who have approved developments that are halfway through, and they're like, hey, we want to come back through and get that road done on the IDD, and it's like, is this what we're going to be, this is what we're going to be fielding, which is like stuff that we just normally require being put into this. So I just am really cautious about carving it up to bare bones on the start when I know there is kind of an escape hatch already built in where we can decide to say like, hey, the board agrees, this meets our criteria, even though, yeah, and I think there just has to be an understanding with staff, like this is going to be a work in progress, and that, and then we're going to probably have to revise this a number of times, throughout the, I'm more concerned now. I think that we should all probably, really get an answer from the county. I mean, let's don't spend any more time on this. If this is actually not, go find a commissioner that's going to sponsor the interlocal agreement. I've seen that film before. And so I think we need to know that. And I don't say that jokingly. I think it's a real risk today, and so I think we need to figure that out quickly, or else we're spinning our wheels. And I know we got a short time, so I want to move on to the last point. Is that I think at the end of the day, I want this to serve specific needs that lead to quality developments that don't speed up that, but allow something unique to happen that might not would have happened. And there's going to be, people in the development community that don't necessarily like maybe what I'm going to say, but this is the whole point of this, yes, it is to add another tool in the tool belt. But make no mistake, like this is a financial bonanza. Could be. And so it could be and we need to really be transparent with the development community about, hey, if you come in asking for the farm, and you're giving us I'm gonna use this example, 2 acres for a school, and you're asking for $30 million worth of IDD funding, like this is no deal. Like I don't know that really balances, and that's where this criteria comes into play. Now, also, if you're going to do $20 million in off-site improvements and you're asking for, $30 million in IDD funding, or 10 or whatever, when that becomes more congruent, which I have no idea what that is. And I think that's the problem. We don't know what that is. But we're going to have that face. I just want to make sure that everyone's aware that like this is not an impact fee financing tool. Period. End of story. Nothing else. Like this is a tool that can be used for all parties to succeed, and we got to keep that at heart because we're talking about all the great things we can get out of this, But at the end of the day, we better be looking at that as a board, or else we're going to spend a lot of time reviewing these applications, and it's not going to feel great.
Alderman Byrd.
Well, I think we've got a lot of work yet to do on this. Yeah, I don't disagree, Patrick. Don't disagree with what you said, Matt, at all. I think we've taken some kind of, taken a finance tool that's supposed to be something more simple and maybe more predictable, market-driven, probably, and turn it into more of a planning enforcement mechanism in some ways. Not totally, but that's what I got out of this when I first read it. And I thought, I put down 5 things that I thought it was a bit overloaded with, a little too heavy. And I thought there's extra land use demands in there. I mean, there's some room for some of these things, of course. But subjective municipal benefit scoring and how that was done, more stiff procedural timelines maybe, and, just maybe more control than I really thought we should have in here. And I just thought it went beyond more of statutory intent of the whole program. So I'm looking at this, I'm going, is a developer going to want to touch this program if we're so bureaucratic about it? And as I read through it, I mean, it took me hours, and I spent a lot of time on this, made a ton of notes, and I'm going to highlight just 2 or 3. I'm not going to get into all the details of my notes in my outline. But I think that, of course, we talked about the 3-to-1, and I get that. We're a AAA bond rating city. But Texas is the country's most experienced PID market. I mean, they are. And if you take a look at that, I'd like to really know what the ratio of these places and who's using those 3-to-1s versus the 2-to-1s and that kind of thing. And then we get people who in our city want to say, well, we have to be cautious of these programs. If these programs were not working, they wouldn't be around for years and years and years and years, for decades. These programs have been around this program's been around for decades. So the sky's not falling, the glass is not half empty. Sure, some things happen, but I think our city's done a pretty good job in vetting our developers and our builders. We pretty well are pretty heavy-handed on that. So, not to get into too many details, but I'll close with a couple of them. I just have way too many here, and I'm not going to go through them. I think I'll end with saying that I think the IDD should follow more of the Texas model, where it's high level, it's predictable, it's definitely market driven. So it's maybe not so bureaucratic and not so subjective, and maybe, some other things I have on here. I think, bottom line, I'd like to keep it simple and attractive to developers so they'll use it, because I think there's room for this program. We have to remind ourselves Franklin's actually taking no risk on it. The IDB issues the bonds. The underwriters, they handle the risk and the risk analysis of it. Investors price the market, not us. Developers carry all the obligations on it. And I think if the city leaves it as is, the results are going to be that no developer is going to use it, and our tool ends up failing before it even starts. And so I just want us to be cautious that we don't over-engineer it. We have things that we need in it, but if we over-engineer it, then the program dies. And I don't want the program to die, because it's been very successful in other places, and I think there's room for it here. And I think the state of Tennessee is not going to allow something to be placed in the state that is going to be detrimental to development and to success. So I've got a lot more, but that's it in a nutshell.
Alderman Potts.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, and I'll be brief because I know we're already past our other meeting start time. Most of what's already been stated, I'm in alignment with. I fully agree with the flexibility. The part that really is the flag in the ground for me is the conservative approach regarding the 3-to-1 ratio, even though it states a 2-to-1 ratio. And I'm looking long-term, not just a few years, but rather decades out regarding ensuring that we're maintaining our AAA bond rating. That's possibly my biggest focus as I'm looking at the IDD. So that's the statement I have, sir.
Let me just say, we have a pretty light agenda on December 9th as it appears, so we could circle back on this on the work session, give you some more time. I do want to emphasize, this is completely open to the developer to make a case to you. It is wide open. We give recommendations and suggestions about what it might look like to meet any one of those 4 pillars, but they get to make the case to you. So I would push back a little bit on this concept that some of the development community might be telling you that this is over-engineered. It is not. It gives you some great examples, but it is wide open for them to make the case to you that it delivers exceptional development or helps you with a significant infrastructure need, or it reaches attainable housing goals. So we give examples, but they are just that, examples. So I would push back on that aspect that I've heard tonight, because it is open for them to make the case to you still, and in ways that we may not be able to anticipate, and I think that's a strength. The other piece I'd like to hear more about is the timing of when you want to make this commitment. I think our mindset had been, you want to know kind of that the deal or the development is baked before you make a commitment to the tool. I'm hearing some interest in maybe making that earlier. I'd be interested in learning what you mean by that and how that can fit with clearly understanding and defining, again, that significant community benefit for putting this tool in place. So if you can help us understand that, we can do some more thinking on that. Again, we have a good amount of time 2 weeks from now, because it's a pretty light agenda. We've looked ahead. So I would encourage you to think about that and give us some feedback between now and then, but also we'll have time then to have the public discussion as well. So thank you.
I think one point that maybe I need to ask about is, we may set the ratio 3-to-1, but the I forgot the term. The conduit issuer may say, no, 3-to-1 isn't enough. So.
Well, and that's why you see the examples that were given to us as a pushback were actually well above 3-to-1 on average. Now, there might be some that go below, and we understand that there might be times you want to do something different, but you ought to set a bar, and your bar shouldn't be the minimum.
Alderman Caesar. Absolutely.
I don't want to restate because so much has already been said on this, and I understand there's passion and energy in the room around us maybe as a board overstepping or staff overstepping and who owns this. And I want to remind our board that it's a we component. We rely on staff to steer, not steal, steer.
Thank you.
A bit of a Freudian slip there, to steer these projects. But we want to also give clarity to the development community so they know what we're looking for when we come forward. But at the same time, we don't want to squash creativity. And we also don't want to load our books with, as Patrick said, and I support it, my vision of our board going forward is if development community brings reallocation of impact fee IDDs before us, it's not going to work. That's not what our board is going to ask out of these. And so there will be some self-governance that happens from this. Just to be clear, staff, between now and December 9th, I'm not interested in using this IDD to accelerate development. Right. I'm using it to support infrastructure and other needed items that, candidly, the community's taxpayer doesn't have an appetite for, but the city needs. People talk about traffic, they talk about need for expansion, they talk about infrastructure. And right now, the options are we either put all of that cost on all of our taxpayers, or we use this vehicle to get those things that our community is telling us they want through a creative mechanism that's allowed by the state. So I think the final plan and the flexibility around that, I understand your curiosity there, Eric. I also know that if I don't know what my budget is, when I walk into the Lamborghini dealership, that car looks attractive, right? But we need to also acknowledge that in order for a developer to bring a project to us, they need to have some idea that it might be a mechanism, that there may be a mechanism for them to receive some of this IDD funding. And while we can't guarantee it, we do need to give them some clarity and some confidence before they make that investment, because this is not free for a developer to bring a plan through our process, and we need to be good stewards there. Mayor, I'm trying to be quick. I think we can get to the nuance and the administration of who sends a note to the neighbors, right? Like, that's less concerning for me. I do have a strong point on the fees being up to 5%. And I think those fees should reflect, and I think, Betsy, you mentioned this, they should reflect actual costs up to 5%. And we should be comprehensive in that. This shouldn't be something that we burden. And if it goes over 5%, then, maybe we should reconsider that in the future. And then my final piece is understanding that Texas is a reference point, and we've seen, higher percentages in Texas. If I'm not mistaken, some of those communities that were referenced tonight have a substantially higher tax burden on all of the residents. And maybe that gives them a greater, bar to do a 4-to-1 or a 5-to-1. I also appreciate the fact that the fair market will ultimately be the one, and how do we write that into this? That the fair market is ultimately the one that sets the rate. I think it might be in there, Betsy, nod your head yes. And if the fair market says we should be at a 2.2, I don't want to require the development project to be at a 3-to-1.
Yeah. And we're not requiring it. We're saying preferred. We're setting a goal.
Yep. And so those are my thoughts. I think this is an opportunity for us as a board to establish clear enough guidelines without limiting creativity that some of the good developers in our community will bring forward. I do also agree adamantly with Alderman Brown, and we should not make this so burdensome that the only people that can fulfill these needs are the ones with big pockets that don't live in our community. And so I'll conclude with that. Thank you, Mayor, for the extra time.
Absolutely. How about the calendar for the Board of Mayor and Aldermen for 2026?
Are we going to see this again?
Yes, we're going to see it the next work session.
Yep.
The
The
IDD.
policy, the IDD policy.
We're going to bring it back, yeah.
Can it be
Anybody-
earlier on the agenda?
I'm sorry?
Could we set that earlier on the agenda? Give plenty of time.
You're probably going to have about 5 items on December 9th.
Yeah. We'll try to move that up earlier in the agenda.
And I just wanted to say happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Betsy.
Speaking of meetings, is there any way to move our meeting in November and not have it like 2 days before Thanksgiving? People do go out of town. I'm just wondering if there's any possibility of moving our, yeah, it's always fourth Tuesday, but we can't really move it to the third Tuesday. I just, difficult.
Good question.
I've been gone. If we
Any
have a
other
meeting
questions on
tonight.
the calendar?
I would be down at the beach.
All right, we'll be back in
back-to-back
10
meetings.
minutes.
Maybe we could do that.